Chapter 1155. Heh. Hong laughed coldly. He waved the halberd in his hand and said in a deep voice, I have experienced Dragon King's strength. However, is the Dragon King sure that he wants to shed all pretenses of cordiality at this time? Even if the Dragon King wins today's battle, he will need more than 10 years to recuperate. Don't let others take advantage of us. When he finished speaking, many spectators felt their faces twitch. Similarly, Hong did not want to clash head-on with Lin Yuan. However, Hong's level was clearly much higher than that of Yu Jiang and Buxingzhou. It was still an unsolved mystery how strong the Black Jiao was when he became serious. Furthermore, the methods of Hong and Yu Jiang, two top-notch experts whose identities were unknown, could not be predicted. If both parties fought to the death, it would be very troublesome no matter who the victor was. In particular, the Black Jiao from the northern frontier was currently in a period of strength. Once he was severely injured at this time, many people would start to target the northern frontier. If they were in his shoes, many top-notch experts felt that they would have to compromise with him. The comprehensive strength of the northern frontier far surpassed that of any of the empires. In fact, with the existence of Lin Yuan, Batu, and Kagura, their foundation would not be inferior to any of the powers other than the Heavenly Gates protectors. Even the Heavenly Gates protectors was essentially an alliance. In private, there were countless independent top-notch powers. Currently, the northern frontier had the qualifications to be called a top-notch power. It was an existence that the empires could not compare to. More importantly, the powerful rise of the northern frontier had touched the sensitive nerves of many people. Even though the northern frontier was the only powerful power now, they were certain that once the northern frontier started to exert its power and destroyed the structure of the seven empires, countless people and powers who had previously restrained themselves for various reasons would jump out and try to divide up this sweet cake. Of course, it would be best if they could monopolize it. The reason why the seven empires were able to become rules-based existences was mainly because the various powers kept each other in check and wrestled with each other. In the end, a blueprint that seemed very fair was finally drawn out. However, in reality, the various powers were no longer satisfied with the seven empires being divided and ruled. This could be seen from the constant collisions and killings between the neighboring empires. They ate from their own bowls and stared at other people's pots. This was not a matter of a day or two. In the past, no one had stepped forward to do this because of a tragedy that all reformers had to face, becoming enemies with the world. For example, Qin Shi Huang had swept through the 6 states and started the reform of writing and writing. As he had affected the interests of too many people, his evaluation had repeatedly jumped between that of a great emperor and that of a tyrannical tyrant. For example, Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty, Yang Guang, was known as an expert in economics. Regardless of whether it was in political or military affairs, he was much more outstanding than his peers later on. However, because he had affected the interests of too many people, he was almost criticized as the first incapable ruler in history. What the northern frontier was doing now was actually similar. Perhaps it was not that great, but there was one thing that was the same: it had affected the interests of too many people. Almost everyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier was able to maintain absolute suppression today. Firstly, it was because Lin Yuan's reforms in the northern frontier had indeed brought about a huge increase. For example, the nationalization of land directly cut off the roots of the aristocratic families, the opening of the Northern Frontier Academy, and the destruction of the sex rice bowls. If one only talked about it, perhaps anyone could do it. However, if one really did it, one would have to pay a huge price. In fact, everyone was well aware of it. Not to mention the counterattacks from the sex and aristocratic families, and the hostility from the other dynasties, the investment in the northern frontier alone had reached a terrifying astronomical figure. Even though the northern frontier had the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which was a gold-swallowing beast that even the Heavenly Gate formation was envious of, the northern frontier could still be described as poor. The teachers and students of the Northern Frontier Academy, as well as the officials and soldiers of the various government offices and army in the northern frontier, were all supported by the northern frontier. This was not something that the other dynasties could compare with by giving out salaries. This was because no dynasty dared to say that all the cultivators or good seedlings who had the intention to cultivate under their rule would be provided by them as long as they were willing to cooperate. In less than 3 years, the resources invested in the northern frontier were enough to support 2 first-rate sects and still be rich. But then again, was this policy of the northern frontier wrong? Obviously not. Looking at the current northern frontier, there was an endless stream of talents in all aspects. Even if there were no suitable talents locally, there would be an endless stream of talented people from other dynasties coming to seek refuge. Even some of the sects and aristocratic families that were said to be sworn enemies of the northern frontier had secretly sent many people to the northern frontier to take up positions. Moreover, they did their best and did not hide their incompetence at all. To these aristocratic families and sects, this was actually considered a basic operation. After all, they also needed to survive, especially when chaos was about to arrive. It was even more necessary to place bets separately. No one dared to say that the person they chose would definitely win. No matter how confident they were in their own judgment, they had to consider carefully. The price of placing all their bets was the extermination of their family. Just like the period of the 3 kingdoms, the Wei, Shu, and Wu kingdoms all had Zhuge family members. Even if one did not know much about the 3 kingdoms and only knew of Zhuge Liang, but after careful calculation, the Zhuge family in Wei and Wu kingdoms actually had many people who were officials. Some of them even had extremely high statuses. And the Zhuge family was just a microcosm of the aristocratic families of the 3 kingdoms. And these aristocratic families and sects disciples who came to the northern frontier might not be comparable to Zhuge Liang or Sima Yi, but their abilities were not inferior in the slightest. Since they had decided to place their bets on the northern frontier, they would not allow some defective goods to ruin their reputation. Therefore, some people said that they could not live under the same sky as the northern frontier, but it was possible that some of the mainstays of the northern frontier were sent by them. Regarding this, everyone, including Lin Yuan, was well aware of it. The northern frontier could be said to be the enemy of the entire world, and Lin Yuan's series of actions had not only allowed the northern frontier to live in such a situation, but even vaguely had the potential to dominate the Tianwu continent. But the most important thing was, they could not stop. Once the northern frontier stopped moving, it would definitely not be a situation where everyone would be fine. To put it bluntly, who knew how many powers were waiting for the northern frontier to fall? Once the northern frontier fell, they would immediately pounce like jackals and wolves, devouring the remains of the northern frontier. Ah! Lin Yuan also chuckled as he looked at Yin Hong with a calm gaze. His expression was somewhat playful. But he did not immediately open his mouth to speak, causing many people to be on tenterhooks. Some were worried, some were excited. All kinds of emotions were displayed vividly at this moment. Chapter 1156. Looks like you're very confident in your own strength. Lin Yuan's lips curled into a grin as he looked at Yin Hong with a gloomy gaze. Almost at the same time, Yin Hong and Yu Zhang's expressions changed. Although Lin Yuan didn't remove the fig leaf, his attitude was very obvious. You, Yin Hong, are confident in your own strength? Are you saying that I, Lin Yuan, am a pushover? Lin Yuan stared at Yin Hong with scorching eyes and said coldly, this king's attitude has always been clear. I don't care who you are, who's behind you, whether you came to the northern frontier to join in the fun or deliberately came to the northern frontier to cause trouble. But since you're here, this king must make you pay the price. Otherwise, if outsiders find out, wouldn't they think that the northern frontier can do whatever they want? As soon as he said that, some people with ulterior motives immediately shrunk their necks. They had already made up their minds. If the northern frontier was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside, after Yu Jiang and Yin Hong left, they would find an excuse to cause trouble at the northern frontier. Moreover, when the Black Jiao really got angry and they did this, could it be that the Black Jiao would really fight to the death with them? As if they were pushovers? But now, the Black Jiao had made his attitude clear. If they came to the northern frontier to cause trouble, they would have to pay the price. Rather than saying these words for Yin Hong and Yu Jiang, it was better to say that they were for the people with ulterior motives. Just like how some people always like to ride on popularity and traffic without any bottom line, if they ruthlessly stepped on the northern frontier, then the benefits for what they were going to do next could be said to be obvious with the naked eye. The most important thing was breaking the Black Jiao's invincibility. Invincibility was a mysterious thing, but when faced with it, not many people dared to say that they didn't care. It was like an ordinary person. If you asked him to start a business from scratch with Jack Ma, although the conditions were the same, the ordinary person would still have a certain amount of fear and worry in his heart. After all, Jack Ma's achievements and family business were there for all to see. Although it was said that even a pig could fly in the wind, reality had proven that a pig really couldn't stand in the wind. Instead, when it left the scene, it was already seen by countless butchers as a piece of fat meat under their butcher's knife. Ever since Lin Yuan had been born, it could be said that he had won every battle. Among them, there were ants who were so weak that they didn't even bother to remember their names, but there were also fierce people who made them feel fear. If they were in his shoes, even if they didn't go to the extent of turning pale at the mention of a flood dragon, who could guarantee that they would always be able to maintain a calm state and convince themselves that they would definitely win? Invincible momentum. This was a sharp blade that Lin Yuan had hung over the heads of all the natives of the sky martial world. Furthermore, as time passed, this sharp blade seemed to be getting sharper and sharper. In normal times, of course, they could ignore this sharp blade, because normally, they wouldn't have a conflict with the northern frontier. Even if there were some small conflicts, it would be between the people below them and the northern frontier. Like the southern wasteland's venerable monster, who had almost shed all pretenses of cordiality with Lin Yuan, also didn't run over to the northern frontier to start a massacre, right? Because in the world of cultivation, the outcome of a battle didn't decide anything. The only thing that could decide victory and defeat was the silent contest between the strongest of the two sides. Otherwise, even if you destroyed the other side's country in one battle, the other side's strongest would madly slaughter your subordinates. In a short period of time, the advantage that you had painstakingly built up would be completely destroyed. Therefore, not everyone was an idiot who didn't know that the northern frontier was too powerful and needed to be targeted. Instead, there wasn't a single power that dared to say that they could fight against the northern frontier alone. Even if they pulled in a few strong reinforcements, they might not necessarily be able to win. Just like what Yin Hong said, even if they won, they would have to recuperate for more than 10 years. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to eat the meat, and would instead become a piece of fat meat in the eyes of others. But what if they were able to pull in reinforcements until they could win against the northern frontier? The distribution of benefits seemed to be somewhat uneven. In the world of adults, there were no fairy tales. Only benefits were the eternal and unchanging theme. If you pulled in a large group of people to fight against the northern frontier, you might not necessarily be able to win, then why couldn't the other side directly join forces with the northern frontier to eat you up? In the face of enough benefits, human nature was as fragile as a bubble that could be easily popped. Just like in the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, the 6 states joined forces to attack the Qin dynasty. It seemed to be a great show of force, and they forced the great Qin dynasty into a desperate situation. However, in the end, because of the uneven distribution of benefits, they parted on bad terms. As a result, the alliance became a joke. The Qin dynasty, which was forced into a desperate situation, became the ruler of the world from the Qin clan, which couldn't even be considered the Qin dynasty, and the first emperor appeared. In every chaotic era, it could be said that there were many talented people. Whether it was generals or strategists, just randomly picking out a famous one, almost all of them had the foresight of the era. Some of the ancient systems were still used in Lin Yuan's era. Were these people fools? Couldn't they see the principles behind it? No, they could see it, but they still wanted to fight for their own or their own country's benefits. They didn't even hesitate to draw their swords against their allies. The current northern frontier was just like the Qin dynasty. It clearly had the power to surpass any dynasty, but if it followed the planned strategy of the northern frontier, it would instantly go from being the most threatening existence to being the least threatening existence. More importantly, now, no dynasty was willing to go head-to-head with the northern frontier, because they would pay a price that they couldn't bear. Instead, it would let the other dynasties take advantage of it. As long as the northern frontier could maintain its strength, no power would dare to start a war with the northern frontier. Yin Hong and Yu Jiang looked at each other. Then, Yin Hong suddenly raised the sky piercer in his hand. Just as he was about to activate his divine power, he suddenly paused and looked in the direction of Kagura in shock. This was because he suddenly realized that there was an existence in the northern frontier that overlapped with his priesthood. He was the star sovereign of the 5 grains of the Do tribe, also known as the god of the 5 grains. He was in charge of the growth of the grains. If he was determined to make the northern frontier pay the price, then the northern frontier would fall into a famine for a long time. When that time came, there would be no way to feed the people of the northern frontier, let alone expand outward. However, when he used his priesthood, he clearly felt a wave of helplessness. It was obvious that the priesthood in charge of the growth of grains had been taken by someone in the northern frontier. Some people in the Eldritch world said that the god of the 5 grains was the Yen Emperor, and Yin Hong didn't deny this. However, the two were not of the same system. No matter how capable the Yen Emperor was, he couldn't interfere with the governance of the heavenly court. Moreover, he couldn't play such tricks in the northern frontier under the nose of Kagura. Chapter 1157. Yin Hong's expression changed several times, but his reaction was extremely fast. He held the halberd with both hands and pressed it down. A terrifying power suddenly leaked out, and the world turned from bright to dark. It was as if this halberd smashing down would cause the world to collapse. Rumble. 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 Continuous tremors spread from where Yin Hong's halberd landed in all directions. Even more than 100,000 kilometers away, this thunder-like tremor could be faintly heard. Here. Me. Up. Lin Yuan's eyes widened as he suddenly roared. The pillar-like torrential rain and the puddles on the ground all rose out of thin air, forming a huge transparent hand in an instant and slamming toward the halberd. The two incomparably terrifying forces collided with each other, immediately causing countless spectators to tremble with fear. Because the halberd was actually unable to withstand such a terrifying force and broke apart at the first collision. That translucent hand was also completely scattered into splashes of water at this moment. However, everyone knew that no matter if it was the flying halberd fragments or the falling water, they all contained an unimaginable amount of divine force. They were far from being able to contend against an existence that was far from being able to contend against. Even the slightest bit of contact would be a path to death. Watching powerful beings fight had always been a convention in the cultivation world since ancient times. Of course, this wasn't because most cultivators had nothing to do and liked to go out and watch people fight. Instead, it was because watching powerful beings fight could often be used to comprehend things by analogy. It was beneficial to one's cultivation and state of mind. However, when it came to watching a battle, one had to know their own limits. When mortal evolution states fought, even mortals could watch. When airborne realm cultivators fought, mortals would be shocked to death even if they got close enough to hear the sounds of the two sides clashing, let alone just watching. In the northern frontier king's mansion, Li Zhong put his hands behind his back and looked at Lin Yuan and Yin Hong who had begun to fight. He said in a deep voice, "A great disaster is imminent. Don't bother to hide your strength. Activate the city protection formation immediately." As soon as his voice fell, the guards of the king's mansion immediately obeyed the order. Soon, a layer of golden light shrouded Shunning City. Those halberd pieces and water streams only caused some ripples when they hit this layer of golden light. In addition, Lin Yuan was already able to eliminate the impact when he made his move. He tried his best to avoid the collision points that would hurt Shunning City. Therefore, the attacks weren't too dense. With the city protection formation newly developed by the Ministry of Works, it could barely withstand the attacks. Lin Yuan looked back at the activated Great City Barrier Array, and his heart was slightly at ease. He could also eliminate the impact of the aftermath of the battle on Shunning City, but he didn't do so before. Even if he didn't like Yin Hong's character, he had to admit that Yin Hong did have some skills. If he were to fight him head-on, he might not be able to win. If he were to multitask at this time and care about the people of the northern frontier living in Shunning City, then it would be hard to say who would win. More importantly, whether it was Yin Hong or Yu Jiang, they were not good people. If they thought that he would care about the lives of the people of the northern frontier, they would never hesitate. They might even put down their dignity as cultivators and attack the mortals, forcing Lin Yuan to save them. Then, they would severely injure Lin Yuan. In the untainted world, good people couldn't survive, especially Yin Hong, who had a bad reputation and could even betray his own father for power. In addition, there was another person who could betray the human tribe and cultivate the Western religious sect in order to go further. If Lin Yuan didn't question their character, then Lin Yuan should question his own character. Yin Hong threw away the broken sky halberd and said with a sneer, "Lord Dragon King, you are so cold-hearted. You don't care about the people of Shunning City behind you. It turns out that your previous performance was just a disguise." Lin Yuan didn't move and said with a sneer, "No wonder your father would rather choose Wugang, who is not talented, than pass the throne to you or your brother. You don't have a discerning eye. I didn't manage Shunning City. Did you cause any damage to Shunning City? Can you scare the people in the city to death?" Yin Hong's face twitched slightly and his eyes became bloodshot. At first glance, they looked like a pair of scarlet eyes. When Lin Yuan called him His Highness Qian Sui before, he only took it as an ordinary insult. Although the lifespan of a cultivator is generally not short, only a very small number of people who hide in their homes and cultivate on their own land can live to the end of their lives. Moreover, they must be very lucky and never encounter outsiders who come to find trouble. Most of the cultivators either die in the hands of other cultivators or under the claws and teeth of demon beasts. Even in the untainted world, similar things can be said to be everywhere. Therefore, even though he was angry when he was called short-lived, it was not too outrageous. In a sense, it was not wrong. Although Yin Hong was still alive, he was actually a spirit on the list of deification, which was similar to the existence of demons and monsters. It was just that his name sounded a little better. Not to mention that he was 1,000 years old, he was taken away by the clan of enlightenment to learn martial arts at the age of 12 or 13. Not long after he finished his martial arts and went down the mountain, he was persuaded by Shengong Bao and finally died in the Tai Chi diagram. His muscles, bones, blood, and flesh turned into ashes. It was true that he was short-lived. But Lin Yuan's words really poked at his sore spot. He never understood why his father chose Wugang, the worst of the three brothers. Both he and his elder brother were the sons of the king of Jiang and had the Jiang family behind them. They had help from both the government and the ordinary people. Moreover, he and his elder brother had never been idle or fighting. Instead, they had been studying all kinds of knowledge seriously. Until his death, he still couldn't figure out how they were inferior to Wugang. In Yin Hong's opinion, Wugang was a complete loser. After the Zhou dynasty destroyed the Shang dynasty, they still couldn't win the hearts of the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. And because Xian burned all the provisions, GFA couldn't move an inch. In the end, he had no choice but to make Wugang a duke and order him to manage the old land of the Shang dynasty and the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. But in fact, GFA was just helpless. If he was so generous, he wouldn't have made Uncle Guan, Uncle Kai, and Uncle Hua build vassal states from the east, west, and north to monitor Wugang together. Based on the situation of the Zhou dynasty at that time, it was simply impossible for them to bear another huge war. If Wugang was a wise lord, there would probably be no such thing as the Duke of Zhou's nourishment and the world's loyalty. It could be said that before Xian died, he had even checkmated GFA. In the end, Wugang held a good hand and forcefully smashed it into pieces. Chapter 1158. In terms of results, Xian should have lost. However, in a practical sense, Xian was the biggest winner. This was because he almost single-handedly overthrew the theory of the right of kings and tried to get rid of Hongjuan's influence to establish humanity. Xian did not burn himself to death at Jai Xinglu. He also burned the wealth that Yin Shang had accumulated over hundreds of years. This made GFA and Jiang Zia, who originally dreamed of eating Zhaoga and eventually swallowing all the vassals in the world, so angry that they almost cried. Not only did they not dare to continue killing the remnants of Yin Shang and Crown Prince Wugang, they even gave Wugang territory and population, begging Wugang not to be stubborn and attack them. This was because the Zhou dynasty had no more money and food at that time. They could not afford to continue the war. If they continued to fight, no one would benefit. They would only be eaten by the other vassals. This was also why Lin Yuan admired Xian the most. He used his own death to give GFA and the heavenly Tao that GFA represented the most fatal blow. He protected the people of Yin Shang and his own bloodline. Be it as a king or a father, he was outstanding. Even the people of Zhou dynasty who were used to beautifying themselves did not talk about this matter. This was because logically speaking, they could not justify themselves at all. One could say that GFA was noble and had the heart of a saint. Therefore, he only killed the tyrant Xian and did not offend Crown Prince Wugang and the remnants of Yin Shang. However, how could one explain that GFA consecutively ordered 3 of his brothers to spy on Wugang near his territory? These 3 brothers were not small characters. Whether it was money, land, or troops, they were all of high standards. In the 4th year after the fall of Yin Shang, GFA suddenly died. His 13-year-old son, Zhou Qingwang, ascended the throne. Then, his 3 brothers who were spying on Wugang directly joined forces with Wugang and caused the rebellion of the 3 eunuchs. They almost destroyed the Zhou dynasty. At the same time, Xian's move also shattered GFA's dream of becoming an emperor. This was because he could not allow a person controlled by Hongjun to become the ancestor of the human Tao. That would be blasphemy to the human race and irresponsible to his descendants. Therefore, destroying the star-picking tower was also an important factor in shattering GFA's dreams of becoming an emperor. With the help of the Ren sect and the Chan sect, GFA could have swept away all the vassals. However, due to Xian's counterattack, he had to call a truce. Not only did he let go of Wugang and the remnants of the Shang dynasty, but he also had to divide the territories he had snatched to the other vassals. Even he only had the rights of rights, music, and conquest. He was still one of the vassals, but he had only overthrown his superior. Therefore, he did not dare to call himself an emperor, nor could he call himself an emperor because he did not deserve it. Xian's death had also planted a seed in the hearts of the Zhou dynasty's vassals. That was, divine authority was not unshakable. So what if GFA has Hongjun, Ren school, and Chan school behind him? With the mountains and rivers of the Shang dynasty and the fate of the Shang dynasty, the heavenly Tao could not touch the human supremacy. Without the existence of traitors like Weizi, Baigan, and Yinhong, even if GFA and Jiang Zia starved to death outside Zhaoga city, it would not affect Xian to be the human king. The marquises and kings of the Zhou dynasty did not see how supreme the heavenly Tao was. They did not see how the immortals moved mountains and filled the seas. They saw how Xian fought against the heavenly Tao and the immortals with his mortal body. He could even turn his hand into clouds and rain. What they saw was the terror and methods of the supreme human being. The Zhou dynasty indeed had a history of nearly 800 years. However, it was inhumane because all the Zhou dynasty's vassals were constantly enfeoffing their territories. Although those vassals were vassals of the Zhou dynasty in name, they had actually become a country within a country. They did not even bother to listen to the orders of the Zhou dynasty. During GFA's era, the Zhou dynasty's territory was still large. Even if the rebellion of the 3 eunuchs broke out, the Zhou dynasty had enough power to quell the rebellion. However, after 800 years, did the Zhou dynasty still have any territory to enfeoff? When those spring and autumn overlords were fighting for the world, the Zhou dynasty was not yet extinct. Moreover, it could be counted as a national throne. After the end of the spring and autumn warring states period, the Qin dynasty completed the unification of the land. The Han dynasty completed the unification of the mind. No matter how bad the later dynasties were, no matter how muddle-headed the kings were, they could be said to be second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Moreover, once the situation of the vassals seizing territories appeared, they would not continue the national throne. It was only when the Spring and Autumn Warring States period could no longer be enfeoffed that a chaotic era like the Spring and Autumn Warring States period broke out. If Hong Jun was said to be a strange man who suppressed the three Taoists of heaven, earth, and man by himself, in that case, Xian was a king who was not inferior to Hong Jun in the slightest. In fact, he was even superior to Hong Jun. Wu Geng had a good hand that his father had left for him. No matter how he played, he would not be defeated and killed. Even if he had to die, he could directly drag GFA and the Zhou royal family to perish together. Others might even think highly of him. In the end, a rebellion of the three eunuchs broke out. It was a strong start but weak finish. It made Zhou Gongdan, a powerful minister, leave a good name in history. It was a model for the future ministers who tried to overthrow the emperor to learn from. Especially Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, who had already been conferred as gods, when they saw Wu Geng's performance in the heavenly court. They were so angry that they wanted to tear Wu Geng apart. They really couldn't understand why their father, who was obviously a man with outstanding foresight and deep schemes, would fail so badly in choosing an heir. He didn't choose between the two outstanding sons, and insisted on choosing the most useless one. However, even though that was the case, Yin Hong and Yin Jiao had already known that their father's actions back then were to oppose Hong Jun. When choosing a successor, he would rather choose a mediocre emperor than choose Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, who were nurtured by the Jiang clan. Because choosing them to succeed the throne was equivalent to Xian personally burning his years of hard work. However, when Lin Yuan said these words, it still made Yin Hong's heart surge with uncontrollable killing intent. This bastard, he deserves to die. Yin Hong suddenly clenched his fists. The blood in his body surged. He stared at Lin Yuan with a gloomy gaze. In the next moment, he suddenly punched out. The world that had just returned to normal darkened again. Even the thunder clouds above his head were scattered by the blood and fist intent. However, the sky was still pitch black. It was as if all the light had been absorbed into this punch. Immediately after, an indomitable and fierce fist radiance shone, as if it was going to break this dark world. Chapter 1159. In Shunning City. Li Zhong's expression changed abruptly. He flew up into the sky and roared, "Fellow cultivators in the city, please lend me a hand. If this punch really hits, even if it's just the aftershock, the city defense array of Shunning City will not be able to withstand it. If the city is destroyed, we can't escape death." By the time he finished speaking, Li Zhong had already activated his Gang Qi and constructed a new layer of light screen under the light screen formed by the Great City Barrier Formation. Then, the guards and officials of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion followed closely behind. They activated their Gang Qi and Genuine Qi, adding colorful colors to this layer of light curtain built by cultivators. In addition to the Prince's Mansion of the Northern Frontier, members of the Demon Emperor Association, the Embroidered Gown Guards, the Northern Frontier Academy, and other government offices affiliated with the Northern Frontier also flew into the air, adding a bit more thickness to this layer of light curtain. Then came the rogue cultivators, well-known families, and even cultivators passing by the Northern Frontier. At the critical moment of life and death, they had no choice but to work together. The fist print arrived with a roar. Lin Yuan's face didn't change. The next moment, the endless rainstorm formed many phantoms between him and Yin Hong. Their original appearances couldn't be seen, but they could feel that even if they were phantoms, they still had extremely powerful power. Almost at the moment when they appeared, the world was shrouded in all kinds of ferocious and domineering qi. Even the defender formation and the defense built by cultivators seemed to be of no help. Most of the ordinary people in Shunning City who couldn't intervene still felt their breathing stagnant, as if there was a layer of mountain on their backs. If Lin Yuan didn't rescue Shunning City before because he believed that Shunning City could protect itself, then at this moment, Lin Yuan's sudden outburst directly hammered the fact that Lin Yuan didn't care about the life and death of Shunning City at all. In fact, this was indeed the case. Lin Yuan boasted that he was not a good person, let alone a Virgin Mary. When he had the ability, he didn't mind turning the Northern Frontier into a fair and just place, allowing those who were depressed in other places to develop their ambitions in the northern frontier. He would also change the policies so that the ordinary people in the northern frontier could live a good life with enough to eat and warm clothes, be well off, and even have the ability to let their own bloodline advance towards the world of cultivation. But when one's ability was insufficient, what righteousness? What reputation? What persona? Everything can be discarded. There were always people who liked to talk about Lin Yuan's identity as a demon beast. Even though Lin Yuan had made reforms time and time again, allowing those who were willing to trade their hands for a better life in the northern frontier to live a better life, there were also people who slandered him, saying that Lin Yuan was just a demon beast. How could he have a heart of compassion? Then, they openly blamed everything that Lin Yuan had done on Li Zhong, the king of the northern frontier. Anyway, in their eyes, the only thing worth worrying about in the northern frontier was Lin Yuan. No matter how good Li Zhong's reputation was, he was just a puppet in Lin Yuan's hands. If they were the ones to blame Lin Yuan, they could also make Li Zhong a good puppet. But even these people didn't know that when it came to personal safety, Lin Yuan's actions were even crueler and more heartless than the demon beasts they had previously claimed. Shunning City was conquered? Rebuilt? People in the northern frontier were all dead? Again. But to take Lin Yuan's life? Sorry, before he returned to the world where he had lived in his previous life and took revenge with his own hands, he couldn't swallow this anger. The fist whistled through the air and shattered the phantoms of the fiend gods. A large amount of water splashed onto the Grand Barrier Array. In an instant, ripples appeared on the Grand Barrier Array. After that, the light barrier formed by the Grand Barrier Array dimmed down. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before it collapsed completely. The rumbling sounds were incessant. With the continuous bombardment of the Great Defensive Formation, the residents of Shunning City, who were already having difficulty breathing, suddenly spat out mouthfuls of blood. Some elderly people simply couldn't bear such pressure and died on the spot. Among them, there were many young children and weak people who were sick. Yin Hong, today you killed my people in the northern frontier. In the future, this king will reward you handsomely. Lin Yuan's eyes trembled slightly, and he said in a cold voice, when this king comes to the untainted land, I will go to the heavenly court to find the list of deification. I will erase your name, scatter your soul, and let you disappear in the river of time. Even if the chaos is reborn and all things are reborn, this king will find you again and kill you hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of times until your origin is completely obliterated. The golden crown on Yin Hong's head had been completely shattered, but his black hair was raised upwards, like a great demon roaring in the world. He grinned at Lin Yuan and sneered, that's only if you have the life to live until that day, you bastard. The phantoms of gods and demons were smashed one after another. When the fist print arrived in front of Lin Yuan, it was still as strong as before, as if it had infinite power and would not stop until it completely smashed Lin Yuan. Many of the dissipating fists also smashed onto the defensive formation of Shunning City. Finally, the defensive formation, which was already overwhelmed by the fists, couldn't hold on any longer. With a series of cracking noises, the defensive formation completely collapsed. The rest of the fist light smashed on the defense formed by the cultivators. Suddenly, countless cultivators in the airborne realm and the heavenly gang realm were sent flying by the terrifying power. Screams of pain could be heard everywhere. However, at this moment, no one would investigate in detail. No one knew how many people had died under this punch. Even the cultivators who were lucky enough to survive lay in the ruins without making a sound. It was obvious that they couldn't even get up. Because under such a situation, there was no point in playing dead at all. So what if they could play it well? When the fist light fell, as long as they were within the attack range, they would be directly smashed into meat paste. As long as they still had the strength to fight, they would definitely go up and continue to strengthen this layer of defense. Pfft! Li Zhong, who was in the lead, opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was frighteningly pale. Li Xian stood in the air not far away from Li Zhong. The aura on his body was even more dispirited. He was actually beaten down by this punch. Seeing this, Li Zhong also sighed slightly. Li Xian had been blessed by the heavens ever since he came to the northern frontier. Since he was also an official of the northern frontier, he had been blessed by the luck of the northern frontier. Coupled with his own talent, he was not weak at all. In a short time, he directly rushed to the 6th level of the Void Realm. Such a cultivation advancement was not only in other places, but also in the northern frontier, where cultivation was generally not low. However, this time, Li Xian was beaten down by more than one level. Li Xian's cultivation was still at the 2nd level of the Void Realm, which was considered to be his solid foundation. Moreover, since this punch had caused his cultivation to fall, it had definitely injured his foundation as well. If he didn't recuperate for a few years, not to mention improving his cultivation might even continue to regress, and he might even become a complete cripple. Chapter 1160. Surge of Wind and Thunder. When the fist seal was almost in front of Lin Yuan roared furiously. The lightning armor attached to his flood dragon roared out at this moment and turned into a lifelike lightning dragon. It crashed into the fist seal in front of him. Almost instantly, the lightning dragon was smashed into pieces by the fist seal. However, the fist seal was also at the end of its flight. When the lightning dragon was completely torn apart, the fist seal was already so blurry that it could not be seen clearly. When it landed on Lin Yuan's body, the damage it caused was not worth mentioning. It only pushed Lin Yuan back 3 meters. It no longer had the violent aura that wanted to tear Lin Yuan apart. This. Yin Hong's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. For a moment, he seemed to have lost the ability to speak. That fist, that was the fist intent his father had left for him. It was also the only thing his father had left for him. He had studied it for countless years, but he could not even comprehend a trace of its true meaning. More importantly, that fist contained the human king's aura that belonged only to Di Xian. That was Di Xian's will that pressed forward courageously, ferociously, and firmly believed that man can conquer the heavens. That was the human king's will that surpassed the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, or even surpassed them. He had broken the aristocratic class and the theory of divine authority. He would rather destroy his country to protect the land of Yan Huang and not let the other races touch it. He had spent his entire life to make man stand above all things. He did not hesitate to fight against Qi refinement cultivators, immortals, and primordial creatures. He had fought until his country was destroyed and his family abandoned him. After that, he still wanted to deal a fatal blow to the puppet emperor supported by Hong Jun. How could this be possible? The fist aura could be broken. With a certain level of cultivation, it could be easily done. However, when the human king's will was imprinted, even a saint would have to temporarily avoid it. The fact that this Black Jiao could withstand the human king's will could only mean that the Black Jiao also possessed the human king's will or something similar. You're done attacking. Now, it's my turn. Lin Yuan raised his head and hissed as his blue-white eyes flashed with cold killing intent. Retreat quickly. However, Yin Hong's expression changed. He shouted and pushed Yu Jiang forward with a flip of his hand while he retreated explosively. At this point, so what if he hated Lin Yuan to the core? The other party could even withstand the will of a human king. He was not in existence on the same level as him. If he continued to fight with Lin Yuan, he would only be asking for humiliation. How could he give up his life here? Yu Jiang was still trying to figure out Yin Hong's punch, so he didn't come back to his senses. By the time the words retreat quickly woke him up, he had already been pushed back more than 30 meters by Yin Hong. When he looked up, he saw the 4 immortal exterminating swords coming at him. Bastard, Ru and dares to harm me. Yu Jiang's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and roared. Di Xian was actually a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. However, compared to the other descendants of the Yellow Emperor, his seniority was much lower. Moreover, Yin Hong called himself Di Xian and not Di Xian. His seniority was even lower, so it wasn't a problem for him to call Yu Jiang ancestor. However, at the critical moment, this descendant of his actually pushed him out to block the attack without hesitation. This was something that even a bastard wouldn't do. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. Was the words retreat quickly a warning? No, it was because Enchanting saw that he was trying to figure out Xian's fist intent and deliberately roared. Firstly, it was to interrupt his comprehension. Secondly, it was because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to react to Lin Yuan's attack and would be killed, unable to buy enough time for him to escape. However, at this moment, Yu Jiang had already been driven to this point. If he still wanted to escape, he would completely treat Lin Yuan as a decoration. He could only roar and brace himself to collide with the afterimages of the 4 immortal exterminating swords. In fact, if he was at his peak, Yu Jiang wouldn't have been able to deal with these 4 afterimages cut from the long river of time. However, he wasn't at his peak at all. He had stayed in the Tianwu world for a long time. Although it wasn't that he didn't receive the power of incense, it was still completely unable to make ends meet. If that wasn't the case, why would he run to the northern frontier to provoke the Black Jiao? Wasn't it just to spread the orthodoxy? In the end, he didn't take advantage of the situation. He even fought a big battle with Batu and Kagura. The injuries he suffered weren't worth mentioning, but the consumption of his divine power couldn't be ignored. The power he could erupt with at this moment was not much stronger than that of the natives of the Tianwu world. At this moment, facing this illusory version of the immortal exterminating sword formation, he learned from the mistakes of Buxing Zhou. At the same time, the group of primitive desolate realm experts who were secretly watching the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although they disdained Yu Jiang and Enchanting's character, in any case, they were all from the primitive desolate realm. After interacting with each other for so many years, they more or less had some friendship. At this moment, when they saw Yu Jiang about to die, they couldn't help but feel a little sad. A primitive desolate realm expert crossed space and entered Hanba's secluded cultivation place. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Hanba, although you and the Black Jiao were somewhat filthy before, it was only a misunderstanding. Later on, you also pointed out a path for the northern frontier. It can be considered as mending the relationship between both sides. If you come forward to plead for mercy for Yu Jiang, I think the Black Jiao will at least give you face, right? Why don't you? He deserves to die. Both of them deserve to die." Hanba's hoarse voice suddenly rang out, directly interrupting the primitive desolate realm expert's words. The primitive desolate realm expert's voice came to an abrupt halt. He shrunk his neck somewhat awkwardly. Yu Jiang and Enchanting were of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. Hanba was even the Yellow Emperor's daughter. In the war to unify Yan Huang, Hanba had also made great contributions to the Yellow Emperor. Although the ending wasn't good, she had left her name behind. Compared to Yu Jiang and Enchanting, she was much stronger. When they interacted normally, Yu Jiang and Enchanting also respectfully addressed Hanba as ancestor. However, at this moment, Hanba's response was deserve to die when Yu Jiang was in trouble. If they were to fall into the Black Jiao's hands one day, Hanba would definitely ignore them even more. Hanba turned her head. Her long hair that was like withered grass covered her face. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. However, her hoarse voice was filled with endless killing intent. She said coldly, "When I find out the whereabouts of Enchanting, I will definitely kill this bastard with my own hands. I will not let this bastard tarnish the reputation of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. And you bunch of clowns. Although your mouth sounds nice, do you really think that I don't know what you are planning?" When he spoke up to hear, boundless baleful aura and blood energy burst out from Hanba's body. His pair of deathly gray eyes seemed to turn as he stared at the primordial creature's head, and he said coldly, "If you continue to instigate my Yellow Emperor's bloodline to become enemies with the Black Flood Dragon, then I'll dig out your heart once more and see if you really have a heart of 7 orifices. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's do it." Chapter 1161. Boom. The sword shadows of the 4 immortal slaying swords dispersed. Yu Jiang's broken body fell from the sword formation. Even his primordial spirit was swept away by the nether realm's black water. Seeing Yu Jiang being killed and Yin Hong fleeing, countless residents of Shunning City clapped their hands in joy. After all, in their eyes, although Lin Yuan was a bit cold-blooded, he was still protecting the northern frontier. Moreover, Lin Yuan was usually scolded as a barbaric demon. At this time, as long as Li Zhong stood out, they would believe that the northern frontier was protecting them. Lin Yuan's attitude was not important at all. Even if he did good things, these people would not appreciate it. All intelligent creatures had a common problem. They would only believe what they wanted to believe. For example, in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, Wu Zetian had won 26 battles and had won 23 battles. There were still 2 battles left before the war started. At most, she had lost 1 foreign battle. She had become the world's overlord, and all the countries had established Wuzhou as the top of the world at that time. However, in the words of Tang and Song Rushing, Wu Zetian had lost 9 out of 10 battles, and the military prestige of the Tang Empire had been completely destroyed. After Li Longji ascended the throne, he pushed down Wu Zetian and crazily discredited Wu Zetian. He cancelled the system of Wu Zetian and wantonly appointed people from the Confucian sect and the aristocratic families. In the later years of Li Longji's reign, the Tang dynasty's territory seemed vast, but in reality, it had nothing to do with Li Longji. There were provincial governors everywhere. It was just like a country within a country. In a serious situation, Li Longji could not even mobilize the troops he could use. He was attacked to the capital and did not dare to fight with the rebel army. He directly abandoned the capital and fled. Such a retarded person was praised by the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty to be a hero of the Golden Age, an eternal emperor. From this, one could see how much wealth Wu Zetian had left behind for him. Then, why did Li Longji and the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty crazily discredit Wu Zetian and push the blame to Wu Zetian, claiming that Wu Zetian was a tyrant who only knew how to use her beauty to entertain people? The answer was very simple. Because they could not accept it. Whether it was Li Longji or the later emperors, whether it was the scholars of the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty, none of them could accept the fact that a lowly woman had climbed over their heads and performed countless feats that they didn't even dare to imagine. Therefore, they would rather abandon this glorious history than truthfully record Wu Jiong as a famous ruler throughout the ages. In Lin Yuan's previous life, almost all historians, except for those scum who fish for fame and praise and pretend to know when they don't know to deceive the ignorant, knew that the history of the Tang and Song dynasties was just for fun. They would rather believe in the private notes circulating among the people with the evidence of unearthed cultural relics than directly believe in official history such as the comprehensive mirror for governance. It was the same in the northern frontier. These people would rather believe that all the benevolent policies in the northern frontier came from Li Zhong than believe that it was always Lin Yuan who treated them well. Although Lin Yuan added fuel to the fire behind the scenes, the reason why this idea could be so popular was that these people already had such a seed in their hearts. Those ambitious people and Lin Yuan just fertilized this seed and watered it. How Lin Yuan did it, why did it have anything to do with them? In short, they didn't believe it. At this moment, the third prince, who had been escorted into Shunning City by the imperial guards, was even more despondent. Looking at the dead and wounded Shunning City, looking at the cultivators who were still pale after surviving the disaster, and looking at the godlike figure in the sky, there was only one thought left in his mind: my father's brain was kicked by a donkey. After a quarter of an hour. In the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. Lin Yuan's body was coiled up. His blue-white vertical pupils looked at the pale-faced brothers Li Zhong and Li Xian, and he said in a deep voice, although Shunning City suffered a great loss in this battle, it can't be said that we didn't gain anything. At least after this battle, the demon venerable of the southern wasteland will tuck his tail between his legs, and the surrounding empires won't even dare to breathe loudly. In the short term, the northern frontier will have no worries. Therefore, in this king's opinion, we should kill the Frost Mirror Khan and occupy the Frost Mirror grassland. Let's start the plan as usual and not delay anymore. Li Zhong thought for a moment, then he cupped his hands toward Lin Yuan and said, "Yes, I will do it right away." Then, Lin Yuan's gaze fell on Li Xian as he said with a smile, "This drop in realm is your calamity, but it is also your opportunity. If you can cross this hurdle, your future achievements will be limitless. Even if you can't compare to your elder brother, you will definitely not be trapped in the void realm like a mediocre person and not be able to find the way for a lifetime. Yes. Li Xian's aura was still weak, but he still cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Lin Yuan gently swayed his dragon tail and said indifferently, "All right, I know you're feeling uncomfortable and can't take this lying down. Therefore, this king grants you an indefinite leave. You can go to Mount Shaoyi or go to the academies of the other empires. This king will take care of everything for you. What do you think? When you come back, you'll be promoted from the commander of the embroidered uniform guards to the governor of the embroidered uniform guards. You'll be in complete control of the embroidered uniform guards in the northern frontier. Those spies outside will also be under your command. What do you think?" Li Xian's breathing paused for a moment. This was using him as a knife. Yingtian Guan of Buxing continent had already been handed over to Yi Balan to deal with. The remaining Mount Shaoyi Zen monastery and the academies of the Confucian sect that had Song Shuaguo's portraits hanging on their walls as offerings were all targets for Lin Yuan to take revenge on. And now, Lin Yuan had given him this task to show others just how ruthless the most ferocious mad dog on the northern frontier was. This was a warning to those forces that wanted to make an enemy out of the northern frontier. It was to let them think twice before making an enemy out of the northern frontier. If they didn't have the ability to overthrow the northern frontier, then when the northern frontier counterattacked, not to mention those who were related to them, even those who were friends with them would have to die. Whether this matter was done well or not, it would cause a lot of trouble. Countless years later, they would be scolded so badly that they wouldn't be able to raise their heads. Then could they not do it? That was fine. Later on, the embroidered uniform guards would directly send a governor who dared to do this and directly suppress Li Xian until he couldn't breathe. Would you believe it? The northern frontier lacked everything now, but it didn't lack capable people. There were many people who were willing to be this mad dog. As for being scolded, would they be afraid of being scolded if they were already a mad dog? If they were really scolded, it would mean that they didn't kill enough, didn't punish enough, and didn't do enough. After taking a deep breath, Li Xian licked his lips and a sinister smile appeared on his pale face. He said in a cold voice, "By the decree of the Dragon King, during this holiday, this subordinate will definitely tell those forces that want to make an enemy out of the northern frontier what will happen to them if they fail to take action." Chapter 1162. 3 days later. The old land of the Shenwu dynasty, the Central Plains, near the imperial capital. Yi Bailin, with his clothes torn and his weapons stained with blood, was riding on a green wolf in the Wisdom State. He looked gloomily in the direction of the Yingtian Temple. Of the 2,000 Yi Bailin riders, less than 1,000 had come to report, and most of them were injured. Yingtian Guan's formation was located in every one of the 108 cities and towns. In order to remove these formation cores, Yi Buhuan's cavalry used all means possible to find out the location of the formation cores within 3 days. However, there were always mistakes in their actions. Yingtian Guan's people naturally had some quick-witted people who could see what these new refugees were plotting. Therefore, the battle to remove the formation cores did not go smoothly. Fortunately, it was still completed in the end. Bureau Chief, the Yingtian Temple must have received the news. Even if we did it cleanly, the formation eyes can't be hidden. At the moment, the Yingtian Temple should have gathered their disciples from all over the country. Maybe they have borrowed some masters from their friends. Can we really slaughter the Yingtian Temple with just the few of us? One of Yi Bailin's riders rode his horse to Yi Bailin's side. With a simple and honest face, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm just worried that if we don't complete the task given by the Dragon King, those little bastards of the genie guards will step on us." Yi Bailin silently wiped the blood off his saber and said slowly, "Who told you that I expect you to slaughter the Yingtian Temple?" But Yi Bailin's rider was slightly startled and said with a simple face, "We only have so many brothers. Could it be that the bureau chief has asked for other reinforcements?" "No reinforcements, but we do have evil spirits." Yi Bailin raised his saber and pointed at the gate of the Yingtian temple. He said with a cold face, "There are some talismans buried outside the Yingtian temple to deter the sky demon. What we need to do later is to rush into the gate of the Yingtian temple and open the bamboo tubes I gave you before. Then we will pour out the things inside and dirty the talismans used to deter the sky demon. In addition, the things in the bamboo tubes can attract the sky demon. When the time comes, the sky demon will swarm in. Even if they have other means, it will be of no use. I am the one who will succeed in this. Even if I don't stop at night, I'm not afraid of death. It's all up to me. Fearless in the face of death." A group of unremitting knight riders raised the sabers in their hands and roared in unison. More than 1,000 of them storming the gate of Yingtian temple was already a matter of life and death. At that time, if they took out the demon-attracting item, they would inevitably fall into a situation of being attacked from both front and rear. Therefore, Yi Bailin's words were tantamount to telling them that this trip would only end in death. But even if they were to drag Yingtian Guan down with them, none of the knight uncollected cavalry had the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, they all raised their war blades and shouted out their battle cry. On the other side, the Frost Mirror cavalry, who had been besieged by the northern frontier for more than 3 months, was now facing a huge crisis. The cavalry of the Shuangjin dynasty, except for the Blood Liao Knights and some tribal khans, was mainly composed of light cavalry. However, no matter how rich the Shuangjin dynasty was, they could only afford heavy cavalry with 3 horses at most. One was for riding, one was for storing equipment, and one was for maintaining sufficient physical strength at all times in case of a sudden battle. The light cavalry was even worse. Light cavalry basically only had 1 mount. Although the weight of their armor was not as exaggerated as that of heavy cavalry, they did not have mounts that could be changed. Therefore, they could only bring as few supplies as possible. A Frost Mirror cavalry could only bring enough rations to last for 3 days at most. Normally, they mainly relied on raiding places and transporting supplies behind the main army. There had never been any major problems because when it came to cavalry, before the rise of the northern frontier, the Shuangjin dynasty was definitely the undisputed number 1. They had always been the ones robbing others, there had never been a situation where they were surrounded and attacked. However, when they encountered the northern frontier this time, they were clearly at a disadvantage. They encountered the even more terrifying northern frontier dragon cavalry and were suppressed to the point where they could not breathe. When the Blood Liao Knights finally arrived, they were defeated by the enemy's feigned defeat and counterattack tactics. The remaining Frost Mirror cavalry did not manage to escape either. When they turned around, they encountered the Blackwater army that was constantly encircling them. There was also the equally elite Night Cavalry. Those Night Cavalry were like evil spirits hiding in the grasslands. As long as they were targeted, there was no way to get rid of them. Sooner or later, they would be completely devoured by them or the Blackwater army that came to support them. Right now, the Shuangjin dynasty's main army was restricted to the northern frontiers area near the Great Wall. Even though the northern frontier army did not attack, they knew that the northern frontier army would not let them off so easily. At the very least, they would take a layer of skin off them. The Frost Mirror tribes had run out of dry rations, and the supplies that were intercepted along with the main army had been eaten as well. The Frost Mirror tribes had completely lost their composure as an alliance army. When they ran out of food, they did not hesitate to attack their comrades from other tribes and steal as much food as they could so that they could live longer. They would only have a chance to live if they could survive until the Northern Alliance decided to put them on trial. At this point, they could no longer steal rations. However, the Frost Mirror tribes were still fighting and killing each other. At first, Frost Mirror Khan thought that they were just venting their negative emotions. But later, he noticed that the bodies of the Frost Mirror tribe's warriors would be taken away by both sides. Once, when he went out for an inspection to boost morale, he noticed that some tribes were still drinking meat soup. Although they were not in good spirits, they were still able to survive. However, when someone handed him a bowl of meat soup, he realized that they had run out of food. Even their mounts had been eaten. This meat soup, Frost Mirror Khan felt his scalp go numb. When he came back to his senses, he was already back in his own camp. He did not dare to observe the situation of the other Frost Mirror tribes. Those were no longer human. They were a bunch of monsters in human skin. What was the Northern Frontier Army trying to do? Why did they treat them like this? They were going to die anyway. Why couldn't they just give them a quick death? Frost Mirror Khan held his head in pain and said with a sorrowful face, I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Men, go to the Northern Frontier Great Wall and announce that this king wants to see the Black Jiao. If the Black Jiao doesn't want to see him, then Li Zhong can. This king wants to ask them what they want to let us go. Chapter 1163. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion, Conference Hall. Li Zhong slowly put down the teacup in his hand and said with a mocking look, who has the time to meet them? I think this old dog is really shameless. He has been forced into such a desperate situation, but he is still hoping for a way out. If I were in such a situation, I would have killed myself to avoid being humiliated. What a shame, to be the emperor of a dynasty. You can't say that. A middle-aged man in a cyan robe also put down the teacup in his hand and said with a faint smile, the Shuangjin dynasty has been relying on their fast horses to look down on the demonic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains. In their eyes, the Kumu dynasty and the Xinwu dynasty are like money bags. They can take as much as they want. Anyway, these barbarians are used to fighting to support their fighting. The last thing they are afraid of is being stubborn. Therefore, although they are forced into a desperate situation now, when they return to the Frost Mirror grassland, they will most likely continue to plunder the northern frontier. If Lin Yuan were here, he would definitely agree with the middle-aged man's words. After all, the nomadic people had always been like this. The Han dynasty destroyed the Xiongnu tribe. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, the Central Plains suffered a great loss due to the chaos of the feudal lords. However, the foreign tribes still dared to rebel and created the tragedy known as the Five Barbarians Rebellion. The Mongolian Yuan dynasty was almost destroyed by the Ming dynasty. The Golden family lost its prestige and the Ming dynasty was defeated by the Manchurian Qing. For these nomadic people in the feudal period, you could either keep beating them until they could not raise their heads or wait for them to plunder a large amount of wealth, land, and population like the Tang and Song dynasties. There was no possibility of peace between the two sides. Li Zhong laughed and did not respond to the middle-aged man's words. Instead, he said in a deep voice, Master Wu, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. You and I both know why you came to the northern frontier this time. As for how to deal with the Shuangjin dynasty, my Dragon King will make the decision. Master Wu has no right to criticize me. Master Wu pondered for a moment, then shook his head gently and said, I am just stating the facts. Besides, since the king of the northern frontier knows what I am here for, you should know that there is nothing more worthwhile for the northern frontier than cooperating with us, right? That may be the case, but the problem is that Master Wu should know that the northern frontier clans have their own rules. Whether it is Dragon King, me, or the northern frontier clans, none of us will allow anyone to break the rules. Li Zhong shook his head and smiled. The Dragon King has his own decision regarding the Frost Mirror Prairie. Master Wu, you came here for nothing. Master Wu was not a clan master from the Xinwu dynasty or a tribal Khan from the prairie. Following the demise of the Xinwu dynasty, some powers that had been suppressed by the Xinwu dynasty came out from the shadows and formed a new power. They wanted to use trade to buy the prairie and become a new dynasty to maintain the structure of the 7 dynasties. However, this idea was clearly wishful thinking. Not to mention whether Lin Yuan would agree to this kind of thing, just the aristocratic families of the northern region would not allow outsiders to snatch food from their bowls. Everyone in the northern region knew that the Frost Mirror grassland existed in name only. This also meant that if Lin Yuan did not make any other arrangements, all the products of the Frost Mirror grassland would be merged into the Chamber of Commerce of the northern region. In the eyes of those aristocratic families, it was another huge sum of money flowing into their pockets. At this time, Lin Yuan could keep the Frost Mirror grassland, but he could never hand it over to other forces. I think you should reconsider because we've come with sincerity. First of all, the clans in the north are all clans from the Shenwu dynasty. Their combined strength is far from what they used to be at their peak. This also means that even if these clans work together, they're just ants that can be destroyed with a flick of the finger in the north. It's the same for the north and the other forces. Therefore, these clans definitely won't be able to take a piece of meat like the Frost Mirror Prairie. If you want to support a puppet regime in the northern frontier, it will be impossible to succeed. Even if you do support a puppet regime, in the eyes of the other dynasties, you will be destroying the structure of the 7 dynasties. When the time comes, the Deadwood dynasty will definitely attack this puppet regime and even swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie that you fought so hard to conquer. Think about it. Are you willing to let the Deadwood dynasty take advantage of the land that the men of the northern frontier fought for? That's obviously not realistic. Therefore, once the Deadwood dynasty makes a move, the northern frontier will definitely be locked in a long war with the Deadwood dynasty. This is definitely not a good situation for the development of the northern frontier. The patriarch of the Wu family sucked in a deep breath and patted his chest. He smiled, but if you give the Frost Mirror Plains to us, you won't have to worry about that at all. With our strength, we might not be able to take on the Withered Wood Empire, but we can keep them busy for quite some time even without the support of the North. During that time, the North will be able to devour the Azure River Empire or the Chuyan Empire. At that time, the North won't even need to send troops. All we need to do is express our support, and the Withered Wood Empire will give up on attacking us. Family Head Wu's voice was very tempting. Thinking about it from what he said, it was indeed a very tempting suggestion. A group of forces that did not belong to the northern frontier had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie. No matter what the outside world thought, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely not let go of this great opportunity to swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie. At that time, the two sides would definitely be locked in a tug of war. If nothing unexpected happened, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely have the upper hand. At that time, the new force that had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie would have to rely on the northern frontier to barely survive. More importantly, the appearance of this new force would form a flesh barrier that would stop the most troublesome Deadwood dynasty for the northern frontier. It would give the northern frontier enough time to swallow the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyan dynasty. Even if they wanted stability, taking back the land that the Shenwu dynasty had lost was a good choice. It would also give the northern frontier enough time to accumulate strength and build a foundation for conquering the world. It could be seen that Family Head Wu had put in a lot of effort before coming to the northern frontier. Not only did he see the northern frontier's ambition, but he even planned the easiest path for the northern frontier. If it was before, Li Zhong might really be tempted, but now, Li Zhong just wanted to spit on Family Head Wu's face. If Family Head Wu was not an idiot, then he wanted to push the northern frontier to the position of public enemy. Chapter 1164. It seemed like the latter was more likely because they would only have a chance to attack if the northern frontier became the public enemy. They could use the northern frontier's power and resources to quickly gain a foothold and improve themselves. When the northern frontier expanded to a certain extent and attracted the attention of all the empires, they could naturally join forces with the Deadwood dynasty to attack the northern frontier. They could also use the geographical advantage of being close to the northern frontier to devour a large amount of resources from the northern frontier to fatten themselves up. Li Zhong picked up the teacup next to him and squinted at Master Wu. He didn't say anything. Master Wu paused for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about where he had gone wrong. Then, his expression changed slightly. He cupped his hands at Li Zhong and said, "If the northern frontier king doesn't believe in our sincerity, we can use the northern frontier's name. If the northern frontier becomes the public enemy of all the empires, we won't be able to escape. Also, I can guarantee that all the benefits we get from the Frost Mirror grassland will be given to you for free, except for the resources necessary for development. In exchange for the protection of the northern frontier." At this point, he revealed a warm smile and added, "We are really sincere." Li Zhong was still looking at Master Wu. After 2 breaths, he said with a fake smile, "I've said that the Dragon King has other plans for the Frost Mirror grassland. Even if I promise you, it's another matter whether I can do it or not. Therefore, Master Wu, you're destined to come here for nothing. Master Wu's expression changed suddenly. No matter what he said, he still wouldn't listen. He came here with a mission. If he couldn't persuade Li Zhong to give up the Frost Mirror grassland, he didn't even dare to think about what would happen to him after he reported back. Let's not talk about this anymore. Li Zhong smiled and waved his hand, saying, Wu family head's sincerity, I have indeed seen it. However, I also have my own difficulties. Wu family head should be clear about this, right? I'm only the king of the northern frontier in name. Apart from having a bit of authority in the northern frontier prince's mansion, I can't mobilize any of the other government offices, let alone the northern frontier army, which is independent of the administrative system. Hiss. Hearing this, Patriarch Wu sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he had long known that Li Zhong was only a puppet pushed forward by Lin Yuan, with the efforts of various forces, the introduction and implementation of the policies that benefited the people in the northern frontier were all placed on Li Zhong's head, and Lin Yuan, who had actually proposed all of this, was instead smeared as a cruel and ruthless demon beast. Under such circumstances, not to mention Li Zhong, who could become the king of the northern frontier, even a pig should have some influence, right? However, he had to believe Li Zhong's words. Because the northern frontier was different from other dynasties. There was no such thing as an imperial court in the northern frontier. Each government office was an independent system. Whether Lin Yuan existed or not, Li Zhong was only the king of the northern frontier in name. He only had the power to approve the proposals of other government offices, reject the proposals, and let them reconsider. He would not have the power to kill his subordinates like other rulers in other places. However, didn't Li Zhong's words make it clear that in the northern frontier, only Lin Yuan's words carried weight? Li Zhong was not the only one who wanted to make this happen. Unless he could persuade more than half of the government offices in the northern frontier and the military of the northern frontier, it was possible to force Lin Yuan to agree to this matter. And it was just a possibility. Even if Li Zhong wanted to do something, those who supported him would only be the mortals who did not know the truth. The local cultivators, aristocratic families, and even the itinerant cultivators who migrated from other places who had the final say in the northern frontier were all on Lin Yuan's side. Li Zhong could mobilize all the mortals in the northern frontier to try to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule. For these cultivators who submitted to Lin Yuan, he had to kill as many of them as he could to make them not dare to continue to cause trouble. After thinking for a moment, Master Wu said in a deep voice, the king of the northern frontier has been oppressed by the Black Jiao to such a state. Don't you want to seize this opportunity to join forces with us to overthrow the Black Jiao's rule and monopolize the northern frontier? Oh. Li Zhong raised his eyebrows and said with great interest, it seems that Master Wu has come prepared. Then tell me, what should I do to monopolize the northern frontier? If I join forces with you, how can I guarantee that I can defeat the Black Jiao? And how can I guarantee that you, or the person behind you will not become the new Black Jiao and continue to step on my head and abuse me? Master Wu smiled, and a sharp light suddenly flashed in his eyes. As expected. He knew that a capable person like Li Zhong would never be willing to submit to others. Moreover, the one who really ruled the northern frontier was a demon beast. Speaking of this, he was no longer sleepy. The king of the northern frontier should know that the Black Jiao is getting weaker and weaker. Before he went to the Endless Sea, there were 2 rebellions by the king of the northern frontier, but they were quickly suppressed by the Black Jiao. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Black Jiao at that time was completely righteous. Even if he attacked the rebels, they would be isolated and helpless. But you are different. You are now the king of benevolence that the people of the northern frontier talk about. Even if the Black Jiao wants to touch you, he still needs to see if the people below are willing or not, right? The label of rebellion can't be placed on your head. To put it bluntly, the Black Jiao is already unpopular. The people of the northern frontier can't wait for you to become the king of the northern frontier, and not the puppet king that the Black Jiao has pushed out. Also, as long as you are willing to be on good terms with the aristocratic families and sects, under the Black Jiao's oppressive rule, the various cultivation forces will definitely be dissatisfied. Even if the various forces don't dare to jump out to support you directly, they will also not completely fall to the Black Jiao's side. If you have our help behind the scenes, even if you can't kill the Black Jiao, driving it away won't be a problem. This is what the people want. The smile on Master Wu's face grew wider and wider, and he said, also, that self-proclaimed crown prince of the Thousand Swords dynasty, Chou Wuying, and his subordinate Lei Fan are now cooperating with us. As long as you agree, they will also be able to get your help. With the support of the people of the northern frontier and those people from the south, what are you worried about? Do. Li Zhong's right hand gently knocked on the table, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. After a while, Li Zhong slowly raised his head, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes, and said, how can I believe that you won't replace the Black Jiao? Is there a difference between being the Black Jiao's puppet king and being your puppet king? Chapter 1165. We're not that ambitious. Family Head Wu smiled as he sipped his tea. The Frost Mirror grassland is enough for us to eat. If we try to take over the northern frontier, we'll definitely die. I can only say that you're overthinking things. Li Zhong was silent for a moment before he suddenly laughed. So, if we go according to your plan, what do I have to do? Or rather, what do I have to give you in order to gain your trust? The Frost Mirror grassland. Family Head Wu's eyes flashed with fanaticism. We're not interested in the northern frontier. However, we won't allow the Seven Empires to break apart the Tianwu continent. We'll establish a new Shuangjin dynasty. After that, as long as you maintain your current attitude, we'll help you reclaim the lost land of the Shenwu dynasty. He paused for a moment as he restrained the fanaticism in his eyes. You just have to convince Black Jiao to hand the Frost Mirror grassland over to us. If possible, we also hope to obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Whether it's manpower or materials, we're confident that we won't lose to the Northern Frontier. As long as you help us obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works research, we'll be able to produce a large amount of related equipment very quickly. This will be extremely beneficial to you. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Li Zhong's expression suddenly became strange. The technology of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could be considered black technology in the Tianwu world. It was several levels ahead of the other empires' technology, and even the Heavenly Gates technology. After all, it was a concept that Lin Yuan had brought over from his previous world. It completely abandoned the rigid requirements of the user's strength. The equipment produced by the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could easily kill a cultivator if they were caught off guard. It was just like the battle at the Great Wall of the Northern Frontier. The Northern Frontier's army had only ignited their gunpowder without anyone controlling it, but they had still managed to destroy the Shueliao Knights. This had caused the only army of the Shuangjin dynasty that could contend with the Northern Frontier's Dragon Riders to be completely annihilated. It had also caused the Shuangjin dynasty's army to be forced into a desperate situation, unable to even break out of the encirclement. According to the Tianwu world's technology tree, different magical tools and treasures in the hands of different people would erupt with different effects. As a result, the same treasures with different cultivations could really be used to show off in front of Master Guan. However, the equipment produced by the Northern Frontier was different. It was just like how a child could easily kill an adult with a gun. The difference between the two was just that great. I'm afraid I cannot fulfill this request. Li Zhong sighed and said, you might not know much about the Northern Frontier. Every government office in the Northern Frontier is an independent system. Different positions in the Northern Frontier have different levels of authority. For example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the Northern Frontier is not inferior to my position as the King of the Northern Frontier. However, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards cannot even send a spy to the Ministry of Works. All the members of the Ministry of Works are secretly selected by the Dragon King. The authority of the Minister of Works is even higher than mine. It can be said that I am their superior in name, but the Minister of Works is still my superior in terms of authority. Li Zhong's expression turned ugly. He frowned and said, whether it is the ownership of the Frost Mirror grassland or the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works, they are all matters that are far beyond my authority. Whether I can fulfill your request or not is another matter. Even if I can, I will be investigated immediately. Right now, I suspect that you have no intention of cooperating with me. You misunderstood. You misunderstood. Wu family head's forehead was suddenly covered with a layer of cold sweat. Because of these few words, the atmosphere that had been eased with great difficulty became cold again. Family head Wu wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with an obsequious smile, "It's my fault, my fault. I didn't even know the situation in the northern region, so I made a rash request of you. However, these two conditions are things that we are determined to achieve. Since you can't do it for the time being, we won't force you. How about this? Please give me a list of people to see who we need to convince to achieve these conditions. I will try to convince them one by one. If anything happens, I will bear all the responsibility. How about it?" 4 hours later. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion, backyard. Li Zhong stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands behind his back. He said in a deep voice, "That's the gist of it. However, the other party is very tight-lipped. They did not reveal which faction they belong to. During the conversation, they mentioned to me more than once that they do not want to annex the Northern Frontier or the other empires. They only want to maintain the structure of the 7 great empires in Tianwu continent. Therefore, I deduce that they want us to focus our attention on the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate." Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Then do you think that it is possible that the other party is really the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate?" Li Zhong shook his head lightly and said, "There is indeed such a possibility, but the possibility is not high. Previously, the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate did not place spies in the Northern Frontier. Now, we can be sure that there are still people from the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate in the Northern Frontier. However, for Guardian of the Heavenly Gate like Ding Zai, unless it is absolutely necessary, they will not reveal their identity. Moreover, even if they reveal their identity, they will directly state which faction they belong to. This is their pride. Therefore, this group of people should want us to focus our attention on the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate. It would be best if there is a conflict with the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate. I suspect that they may have come from the south. South, demon sect disciples? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Okay, I know. Continue to follow up on this matter. When necessary, you can reveal some research results of the Ministry of Works to them. However, there is no need to feed them too much. You can handle it yourself." "Yes." Li Zhong cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. After Li Zhong left, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Hong Jun, this guy, was strong, but he always felt that he was suffering from paranoia. Originally, he was a grand cultivator who relied on the heavenly Tao to become his own body. In the end, he merged with the heavenly Tao and treated the heavenly Tao as a puppet. Later on, he directly suppressed the mortal and earth Taos. Now that he felt that the heavenly martial world was a threat to him, Hongjuan's movements were obviously bigger. First, it was the generals Hang and Ha, Mosquito Daoran, and the others who came out in the open. Behind the scenes, there was also Yin Hong who was on the investiture of the gods list. Now, even the demon sect disciples who were related to the Nether River ancestor were involved in this matter. The invasion of the great desolate world into the heavenly martial world was obviously getting more and more serious. Chapter 1166. The investiture of the gods was an inescapable existence in the history of myths and legends. When talking about the investiture of the gods, it was impossible to avoid the mention of the immortals. It was also from the investiture of the gods that the eldritch world had never given birth to another powerful life form. For example, Neza and the monkey were worshipped by countless people. They were existences like the god of war. In essence, they were also chi refinement cultivators. Moreover, Neza killed the third prince and lost his life. He seemed to have revived, but he became a puppet in the hands of perfected Tai. As for the monkey's combat power, it was indeed debatable. The title of Great Sage equaling heaven was enough to describe the monkey's character, but it did not match his strength. It was not that the Great Sage equaling heaven was not worthy of the monkey. It was the monkey who was not worthy of the Great Sage equaling heaven. If the monkey wanted to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace and use the flower fruit mountain as the base, he would definitely go through the east heavenly gate. The monkey insisted on going to the south heavenly gate because the person guarding the east heavenly gate was someone the monkey did not dare to provoke. Not to mention that person, even that person's mount could beat up a monkey. The Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was that person's mount. According to the records in the Taoist books, a roar from the nine-headed lion could open the Hell's Gate. In the journey to the west, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits also roared. He was an existence that could reach the three sages and the nine springs. He was an unparalleled great demon that was respected by all kinds of lion demons as the ancestor. Compared to the monkey's self-titled Great Sage equaling heaven, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was undoubtedly more terrifying. In the original journey to the west, when the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was a demon in the lower realm, he did indeed beat the monkey. To be precise, he beat the monkey and Monk San together. The monkey could not escape from the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits even if he did a somersault. The West Heavenly Gate led directly to the Spirit Mountain in the west. The person guarding it was either a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Similarly, they were existences that the monkey could not afford to provoke. As for the person guarding the North Heavenly Gate, it was Great Emperor Zhenwu, the existence that was known as the Demon Buster Patriarch. Even if the Grand Supreme and Hong Jun were to fight and the deities wanted to go easy on the monkey, there was still a rule. Great Emperor Zhenwu could not beat the monkey. Great Emperor Zhenwu's face therefore, the monkey only dared to act impudently at the Southern Heavenly Gate. After all, although the Southern Heavenly Gate had many guardians, the strongest was still the Grand Supreme Elder. The journey to the west was a trap, and the Grand Supreme Elder's attitude towards the monkey had always been ambiguous. It was normal for him to turn a blind eye to it. As for the other guardians, regardless of whether the guardians of the Southern Heavenly Gate were the four heavenly kings or the mighty miracle god, the monkey still had the ability to break through. Furthermore, after breaking through the Southern Heavenly Gate, the monkey had sneaked all the way and was only intercepted outside the Lingxiao Palace. There was no uproar in heaven at all. Because of the investiture of the gods, there was the investiture of the gods' cataclysm. Countless people who faced the investiture of the gods died on the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, which led to the heavenly court. However, before Haotian's celestial court, there was another celestial court in the untainted world, which was established by the East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun. It was also called the Ancient Celestial Court, the Ancient Demon Court, and the First Celestial Court. At its peak, it regarded the way of heaven as nothing. This also meant that when Emperor Jun and the East Emperor Tai were in charge of the untainted world, Hong Jun, Tao Ancestor and the six destined sages all had to stand aside. What was more terrifying was that during the ancient demon court, the demon tribe was not the only dominant force. Another force that could compete with the ancient demon court was the 12 ancestors of sorcery and the ancient sorcerer tribe, which were formed by Pengu's essence and blood. The 12 ancestors of sorcery were the masters of the 12 great ways. When they joined forces to set up the 12 celestial demons formation, they could condense the real body of Pangu, which had the power to destroy the world. As a result, the demon tribe controlled the sky and the sorcerer tribe controlled the land, which almost divided the untainted world into two. At that time, the ancient demon court had 10 demon commanders, also known as the 10 demon kings and the 10 demon saints. In addition, there was a demon master Kuanpeng, who almost became one of the 6 destined sages. At the peak of the ancient demon court, any one of them was not inferior to the celestial court later. The sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe were so strong that Hong Jun had no choice but to use the power of the way of heaven to start the cultivation tribulation of the great war of the sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe. In addition to his series of calculations, he pushed the demon tribe to the bottom of the untainted world and almost destroyed the sorcerer tribe. If it were not for the protection of Empress Pingxin, who was formed by the primordial spirit of Hoodoo, who was schemed by Hong Jun, the sorcerer tribe would have been completely destroyed. Now, Before Lin Yuan could figure out what was going on with the ancient demon court in the Tianwu world, he had encountered Generals Heng, Ha and Yin Hong, who were listed on the investiture of the gods during the investiture of the gods' tribulation. All kinds of signs were reminding him that the heavenly court of the great desolate world had probably arranged many hidden hands in the Tianwu world, waiting to plot against him. It was hard to say what the background of the Wu family head and his gang, who claimed to be suppressed by Lei Qiusheng, were. But somehow, Lin Yuan felt that this gang had something to do with the celestial court of the untainted world. So, who is it? Lin Yuan closed his eyes slightly and quickly calculated in his mind. He went through the existence of the heavenly court god system one by one, but he still couldn't find any clues. At the very least, the information he had at hand couldn't confirm that the other party was related to the heavenly court, let alone analyze who the big boss of the heavenly court behind them was through this information. For the time being, Sanqing and Sanqing's disciples could be ruled out. Lin Yuan really did not believe that sect master Tong Tian would plot against Hong Jun, and Tai Shangdao ancestor would fall out with him directly. Only the primeval Lord of Heaven would be able to watch from the side. The main reason was that the primeval Lord of Heaven was not an honest person. Yin Shang. Suddenly, a light flashed in Lin Yuan's mind. In the investiture of God's cataclysm, there were not only disciples of the three religions who were on the list of gods. Not to mention generals like Heng and Ha in the mortal world, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, Ji Chang and GFA did not want to keep these traitors alive. Firstly, their identities would threaten their rule. Secondly, they were officials of Yin Shang who had betrayed DXIN. If they were allowed to live and spread the news, it would threaten the ruling position of the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, these traitors were basically killed by Jiang Zia and the father and son of the Ji family. After they were killed, they simply fabricated a few false images and bragged about them. Then, they became the loyal people who were killed by the tyrant. Many people said that changing history started from the Tang dynasty. In fact, it was not. Changing history had always been a bad habit of the Confucian sect. As the founder of the Confucian sect, the Zhou dynasty would certainly not lose this skill. For example, Bai Gan, who had the heart of 7 orifices, had a glorious and positive image in history. In fact, what Bai Gan did was really inhumane. Chapter 1167. Bai Gan was a member of the royal family of the Shang dynasty. When DXIN saw Bai Gan, he had to respectfully call him uncle. When he was young, he did not defeat DE and became a loser in the struggle for imperial power. However, the struggle for imperial power at that time was not as cruel as the struggle between father and son and brothers. Therefore, DE did not kill Bai Gan. Instead, he entrusted Bai Gan with an important task. Bai Gan was overjoyed at that time, thinking that he had finally killed DE. Although he was not young anymore, he could still enjoy the supreme imperial power for the rest of his life. Therefore, he assisted DXIN with the heart of being a powerful minister. However, he did not expect that DXIN was even fiercer than his father. He used women and slaves, personally went to the people to experience the hardships, prepare for war, and expand the territory. It could be said that there was nothing wrong in all aspects. However, DXIN broke the class structure and used a large number of talented people who were born as slaves, directly threatening the status of the aristocrats. In addition, he was strict with the law and emphasized that if the emperor violated the law, he would be punished the same as the common people. Not to mention that the punishment could not be imposed on the scholar officials, it was already good enough that he did not add a level to the crime of knowingly breaking the law. Therefore, Bai Gan did not do it. Not only did he not become a regent, but he also lost his original power. Therefore, when he knew that Shi Qi wanted to rebel, Bai Gan still flirted with Ji Chang and GFA. When King Zhou went south to expand the territory and left a large number of elite troops to guard the newly acquired territory, Bai Gan directly launched an attack signal to Jiang Zia. In addition, DXIN never looked at the identity of those who broke the law. Not to mention the vassals who had disloyal thoughts. Even those who did not want to be the emperor had to think about whether they would fall into the hands of Dxian if they broke the law. In the Shang dynasty, the emperor was respected and not the king. Compared to the so-called king of Zhou, the emperor of the Shang dynasty could really kill and seize. Therefore, the image of a licentious and tyrannical tyrant appeared vividly on the paper. All the warlords returned to their armies and went straight to Chaoga. They had to rely on a bunch of traitors to barely annihilate Yinshang. After that, they went all the way and killed most of the traitors of Yinshang. Therefore, a series of names such as Baigan, Yinhong, and Yinjiao appeared on the investiture of the gods. It could be considered as an early example of, once the cunning hare is killed, the hound is cooked. The reputation of these traitors was as good as it could be. They were better than the traitors who wanted to seize the power of the Shang dynasty and even betray the country. They ate the salary given by Dxian and were loyal to the father and son of the Ji family. They were even given the title of Eternal Loyal Minister. It was even more ridiculous to say that he was licentious and tyrannical. King Zhou only had 3 sons in his life, which were Yinhong, Yinjiao, and Wugang. Ji Chang claimed to have hundreds of sons. Just in Lin Yuan's previous life, there were as many as 17 of them who could testify. Therefore, sometimes, one really could not be too serious. When he thought of this, Lin Yuan clearly felt that the light in his mind became clearer. This kind of style that was passable on the surface but liked to play dirty tricks in the dark. Moreover, he could drive Yinhong to the northern frontier. He was afraid that it was really a literati star who did it. At the same time, Baigan, whose god name was called by Lin Yuan, suddenly shivered and looked in the direction of the northern frontier, dumbfounded. Is there something wrong with this Black Jiao's brain? I didn't even show my face, and you still think that I was the one who ordered Yinhong to go to the northern frontier to cause trouble for you? Although Baigan was a literati star, he had never been very popular. After all, the Zhou dynasty was chaotic to begin with. After Gfa's death, there was a rebellion among the 3 eunuchs. After that, the various lords fought and killed each other, and the people fought until their brains were fried. The Spring and Autumn Warring States period was an era where hundreds of schools of thought contended. Although there were hundreds of schools of thought contending in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, Confucianism was never the orthodox school of thought. The 3 schools of thought were the main schools of thought in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period. In that kind of chaotic era, people did not ask for a literati star who was talented in literature to descend to the mortal world. They wanted an all-rounder who could kill enemies on horseback and pacify the country when they dismounted. Liu Bang, who took over the foundation of the Qin dynasty, was known as the ancestor of Confucianism. He was very good at asking others to be saints and playing with double standards. However, he was also a ruthless person who ruled the world with law. Even when he was in decline, he supplemented it with Elder Huang's teachings. Worshipping gods was not popular in the Han dynasty at all. Later on, Emperor Wu of Han dismissed hundreds of schools of thought and only respected Confucianism. However, he was also a scholar with the skin of Confucianism and the bones of Confucianism. Even Liu Che used the teachings of the school of war more than the teachings of Confucianism. In fact, if Confucianism had not proposed the concept of great unification, Emperor Wu of Han would not have cared about this group of hypocrites. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, there were countless lords and lords everywhere. Every school of thought could make the country strong and rich. Only Confucianism could be said to be, whoever used it will die. It was only during the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty that Confucianism became popular, especially during the Song dynasty. Even if one had the title of Xiuzai, one would not kneel to an official. This made some gods who were in charge of literary talent very popular. It was also at that time that Baigan's incense flourished. However, it was also thrown aside after a few years. Among the gods of the heavenly court, Baigan could be said to be at the bottom. If it was not for his quick thinking, he really would not be able to command the 5-grain star sovereign Yinhong of the fighting division. This time, their group lost Yu Jiang and injured Yinhong. Even Xian's fist that contained the will of the human king smashed into the northern frontier. It would definitely not be able to recover in a short time. At this time, if he was caught by Lin Yuan, even if he did not die, he would lose a layer of skin. What a pity. Bai Gan gently smacked his lips twice. His gaze was as gloomy as water. He murmured, although Hanba has been in seclusion for many years, I did not expect his mind to be so clear. Humph, you saw through my plan and did not want to be my knife. How can I continue to let you live? As his voice fell, Bai Gan had already turned into a ray of light and escaped towards his cave residence. A moment later, a blood-winged black mosquito fell out of the void. Its breath was almost dispirited to the extreme, as if a gust of wind could directly blow it to death. However, Mosquito Doran's gaze was very calm. It swept across the direction that Bai Gan escaped in, and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. He had already escaped from Lin Yuan's control for 3 days, but he still could not think of a way to go. After all, he came here on Hong Juan's orders. If he could not complete the mission, even with the protection of the Tai Shangdao ancestor, Hong Jun could make him suffer a fate worse than death. However, against that extremely strange Black Jiao, he felt that he really did not have much chance of winning. Chapter 1170. The Black Jiao of the Northern Frontier, or simply the Northern Frontier, could be said to have a reputation. However, it was only a reputation. Even the Heavenly Martial World's overlord, the guardian of the Heavenly Martial World, had people like Wei Li and Lin Yuan as enemies, let alone the Northern Frontier, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than the other empires, but was still some distance away from becoming a first-rate force. The Southern Demonic Beast Range couldn't be compared to the Hengduan Mountain Range and the Endless Sea. However, with the Southern Demonic Beast Venerable holding the fort, it could be said to have suppressed the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire for many years. In terms of military strength, the Qingjiang Empire directly gave up on resisting the Southern Demonic Beast Range, and the Chuyan Empire's trump card, the Chuyan Tiger Soldiers, had even put in 120% of their energy to keep an eye on the Southern Demonic Beast Range. In terms of economic strength, they had also been using the gold squandering den and the Qingjiang Empire to harvest all kinds of resources from the Chuyan Empire and the Qingjiang Empire. Perhaps the Southern Demonic Beast Range couldn't compare to the Shenwu Empire and the Deadwood Empire, but the confidence they had cultivated in the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire made it impossible for them to run away in front of the Northern Frontier. Furthermore, 11 of the 12 demonic pillars of the Southern Demonic Beast Range had come. With such a lineup, it didn't matter who the leader of the Northern Frontier was. Unless the Black Jiao personally came, they had the confidence to put up a fight. Taking a step back, if the Black Jiao personally came, they could just turn around and leave. Because that way, their strategic goal would have been successfully achieved. The relationship between the Southern Demonic Beast Range and the Northern Frontier could be said to be like fire and water. It wasn't that the gold squandering den and the Chuyan village couldn't enter the Northern Frontier to harvest resources, but the Southern Demonic Beast Range's previous actions were equivalent to declaring war on the Northern Frontier. The relationship between the two sides had reached a point where only one side would be able to rest. Perhaps there was still room for discussion before, but after the Hengduan Mountain Range incident, the Black Jiao had already announced that even if their Lord Demon Venerable was willing to lower himself to mend the relationship with the Northern Frontier, with the Black Jiao's temper, he would flip the table. There weren't many people in the world who were fools. The Northern Frontier's current strategy, the Northern Frontier's strategy, but after the other empires saw the Northern Frontier and Empire's confrontation with the Deadwood Empire, they would definitely relax their guard against the Northern Frontier. This was a very reasonable thing. No one demonic beast range had the Northern Frontier. Therefore, when the Northern Frontier restricted themselves, they would only be happy to see it happen. Perhaps only the Deadwood Empire would be unhappy. What the Southern Wilderness Demonic Beast Range did was to force the Northern Frontier to give up on the most difficult path and attack the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire, which were easier to take down. As for how to make the Northern Frontier change their strategy, it was very simple. Harass. As long as they provoked the Northern Frontier would definitely mobilize a large-scale army, high-level cultivators, and demonic beasts to fight back. However, once things developed to this stage, it would be very difficult for the northern frontier to turn around and attack the Deadwood Empire. This was because war was a battle of resources. Food, equipment, and population were all necessary factors. No one doubted that the northern frontier's wealth could support one or two nation-destroying wars. No one even doubted that the northern frontier had enough resources to completely destroy the empires. However, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time to turn these resources into cash. Starting a war with the Deadwood Empire at the northern frontier was actually the best decision. First, it was to restrict him as much as possible so that the other empires would let down their guard against the northern territory. But strictly speaking, the Withered Tree Empire was a bone that he had to gnaw on, and it was already tough enough now. If he left the Withered Tree Empire for last, who knew how powerful the Withered Tree Empire would become after absorbing the remnants of the other empires that had failed? Second, after starting a war with the Deadwood Empire, the rhythm of the northern frontier's war would definitely change from a blitzkrieg to a protracted war. Without a few years of effort, they would not be able to devour the Deadwood Empire. Even if they did, it would take a lot of time to digest the remnants of the previous dynasty and deal with the local sects and clans. Just like Lei Chioshing, who had established his country for decades, he still could not completely wipe out the remnants of the Zhao clan. What Lin Yuan wanted to do was even more extreme. He did not want to devour the previous dynasty's imperial family. Instead, he wanted to suppress all the clans and wipe out all the sects. Once they entered a protracted war, the northern frontier would have an endless supply of soldiers and all kinds of resources. After completely devouring the Deadwood Empire, they would turn around and attack the other empires. Although it was not as simple as an adult beating up a child, it would greatly reduce the difficulty. What the Southern Wasteland's Demon Vein was doing now was to forcefully drag the northern frontier into a blitzkrieg, forcing the northern frontier to devour the Azure River Empire and the Deadwood Empire. Then, they would become the public enemy of all the empires in the Tianwu world. At that time, it would be much easier for them to form an alliance to suppress the northern frontier. In any case, I will not retreat. Yushi looked at Fei Xian with disdain and said coldly, "If that Black Zhao is willing to play, I will play with him until the end. Let's see what kind of almighty being that Black Zhao is." First, he killed third brother, then he plotted against a demon venerable. Yushi rolled his eyes and looked at Qinyu. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Although the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars was a collective name, it did not mean that they were all as close as brothers. On the contrary, the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars were divided into various groups due to their different personalities and territories. Not only were their relationships not harmonious, there were even a few demon pillars who had personal grudges against each other. Fei Xian knew how powerful the northern frontier was, so he was not willing to fight head-on with the northern frontier. However, Yushi was different. Whether it was in terms of ability or personality, Yushi was a hawk through and through. Previously, when the Black Zhao suddenly attacked the Rising Cloud Empire, it was Yushi's doing. Later on, the Rising Cloud Empire stabilized and did not continue to be encroached upon by Yushi. However, it was an indisputable fact that the Rising Cloud Empire had been ruthlessly bitten off a piece of meat. However, to a dove like Fei Xian who valued harmony, Yushi's actions were undoubtedly self-destructive. After all, although the Rising Cloud Empire had established the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to guard against the Southern Wasteland's Demon Vein, in reality, the relationship between the two parties had always been good. Otherwise, the Southern Wasteland's Demon Venerable would not have been able to request the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to attack the Northern Frontier's army. However, Yushi took advantage of the Black Zhao's attack to destroy the Rising Cloud Empire's imperial court and the Demon Venerable's seclusion to recuperate. He did not even discuss with them in advance and privately mobilized his troops to attack the Rising Cloud Empire. The subsequent Southern Wasteland's Demon Vein's military forces were all contributed by the other demon pillars when they knew that the relationship between the two parties was irreparable. However, in the end, the only one who attempted to annex the Rising Cloud Empire was Yushi alone. Chapter 1171. It was the same for the Chuyan dynasty, and it was the same for the northern frontier? Although Fei Xian had opinions about the Chuyan dynasty, he would not voice them out directly. This was because there was no right or wrong in this world. The one with the bigger fist was the reason. This time, the Chuyan dynasty was almost completely annihilated. It was normal for the southern wilderness demon range to take a bite out of them, but what about the northern frontier? For some reason, the sky demon did not provoke the northern frontier at all. Instead, he wandered around the empty south and eliminated the sects and clans that had the strength to take root in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. From a strategic point of view, the sky demon's actions were completely for the northern frontier. When the northern frontier turned around and devoured the sky demon, they could smoothly take over the entire Shenwu dynasty's territory. Moreover, there would not be a second voice that would hinder the development of the northern frontier. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier had quelled the chaos in the Hengduan Mountains and forced the Shuangjin dynasty to a dead end. It was a complete victory. With this victory, no matter who the northern frontier faced next, they would definitely be irresistible in the early stages. What was the difference between provoking the northern frontier at this time and courting death? Even if they provoked the northern frontier for the sake of a strategic victory, anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was just an excuse. Everyone knew that once the northern frontier went west, they would definitely devour the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyan dynasty to minimize their future enemies. How could the southern wilderness demon range that was sandwiched between the two dynasties be spared? Not to mention that it was the southern wilderness demon range that was provoking the northern frontier this time. Fei Xian could not comment on the strategic layout of the southern wilderness demon range. However, he knew very well that once he did that, the southern wilderness demon range would definitely be destroyed. Idiots like you, she probably thought that it was the demon venerable's confidence and most likely wanted to bite off a piece of meat from the northern frontier. However, they never thought that with the demon venerable's strength, he could go anywhere he wanted. Whether it was the Hengduan Mountains or the endless sea, he could live very well. But what about them? They were just a bunch of ordinary demonic beasts. Even if the 12 demonic pillars were at the demonic king realm, after offending the Black Flood Dragon, the Endless Sea and the Hengduan Mountain Range would be benevolent if they didn't help the Black Flood Dragon. As for the other human empires, there was no place for demonic beasts like them. Fei Xian stared at Yushi with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Invincible? You really dared to say that? Don't you know how to think before you open your mouth? If the northern frontier really invades the west, the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire will definitely perish. How can we, the southern wilderness, be spared? With just the 11 of us demon kings, do you expect the demon venerable to defeat the Black Jiao?" At the same time, the 12th Ji Qian, who was the youngest of the 12 demon pillars, also said, "Lord Demon Venerable defeated the Black Jiao? Ha! If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then he wouldn't force the northern frontier to attack us. To put it bluntly, Lord Demon Venerable just wants to drag the northern frontier down with him. If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then why not take advantage of the northern frontier and the Withered Wood Empire to lead us to backstab the northern frontier?" At this point, he paused and added, "Of course, what I'm saying is that even if the southern wilderness and the northern frontier perish together, our Lord Demon Venerable's strength is still there. Without the southern wilderness, he can still live comfortably. There were never so many fools in the world. When you treat others as fools, then you are the real fool." Now, the Demon Venerable clearly wanted to give up on the southern wilderness and drag the northern frontier down with him. At this juncture, their Lord Demon Venerable was in seclusion recuperating. It was obvious that he did not want to get involved. When the northern frontier got angry, they would all be abandoned. 12, you think so too? Yushi glared at Ji Qian fiercely and growled, "I don't know what's so great about that Black Jiao to make all of you so afraid. Yes, I admit that the northern frontier is developing very quickly, but the northern frontier might not be able to defeat us southern wilderness. Why are all of you so pessimistic before the war even starts?" Fei Xian sneered and said, "It's not that we're afraid, it's that you're too stupid. You didn't see clearly what kind of trap was hidden behind this matter. Only you foolishly jumped into it. You." Yushi's eyes turned cold. The killing intent on his body suddenly skyrocketed. Bang! Qin Yu suddenly slammed the table heavily. He glanced at Yu Shi, Fei Xian, and Ji Qian's faces and said, "I understand what you mean. Stop arguing." Qin Yu looked like he was playing the peacemaker, but in fact, his actions were no different from declaring his position. Because the Southern Wilderness Army was still attacking the northern frontier, and the 12 Fei pillars were still here. Qin Yu's words were to shut Fei Xian and Ji Qian up. "Boss," but Fei Xian stared at Qin Yu, unwilling to give up. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes and coldly interrupted Fei Xian's words. "You're right. The demon Venerable is using us and the southern wilderness as pawns to fight the northern frontier. You she really believed that we could defeat the northern frontier? That's really stupid. But then again, aren't you and Ji Qian just as stupid?" Fei Xian and Ji Qian looked at each other. They didn't quite understand what Qin Yu meant. Since they already knew that the demon Venerable was going to use them as pawns, were they still going to follow the demon Venerable's wishes? It was wrong to do so, so how could it be wrong not to do so? Qin Yu sighed and said helplessly, "Don't forget that we're still the 12 Fei pillars of the southern wilderness. Above us are the demon Venerables. If you quit now, yes, you can make the northern region ignore us. But do you think you can protect the southern wasteland demon veins just like that? Why, do all of you think that the demon Venerable is already dead?" Qin Yu's words froze the atmosphere. Thinking about it this way, it was really wrong to do or not to do it. If they didn't provoke the northern frontier wouldn't attack them now. But how would they explain it to the demon Venerable when they returned? The demon Venerable's strength was there for all to see. Not to mention Fei Xian and Ji Qian, even the 12 Fei pillars. Oh, now it's the 11 Fei pillars. They might not be able to defeat the demon Venerable even if they fought together. Then, aren't we dead meat? Min Yu, the 5th-ranked Fei pillar, asked with a trembling voice. Instantly, all the Fei pillars fell silent. It was as if no one dared to face this bloody question. Should they choose to live a little longer or die immediately? How could they solve such a question? Chapter 1172. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at the despairing demon pillars and sighed once more. He could not help but feel disappointed. After all, it was not a good experience to be teammates with a bunch of pigs. After a moment of silence, Qin Yu said slowly, "You can't say that. With our current position, it's true that we'll die whether we do it or not. But what if we change our position? Everyone here is a demon king. Even in the northern frontier, we'll be strong. If we join the northern frontier Black Jiao and get accepted, we'll win this game. What kind of joke is this?" Yushi suddenly stood up in a somewhat irritable manner and roared, "Submit to that black flood dragon? Boss, do you know what you're saying? Even if we're willing to join, that Black Jiao has to be willing to accept us. What we're doing now, isn't it just forcing the northern frontier to die? If you want to join the northern frontier now, isn't it just a matter of time before we die?" Ji Qian's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of understanding, and he said with a bright idea, "I understand. I get it. Boss, you can actually win this game. Amazing." Qin Yu's plan was not complicated. Therefore, Ji Qian understood Qin Yu's warning after a moment of deduction. They were now on the side of the 12 demon pillars of the southern wasteland, so they naturally had to work for the southern wasteland demon range. Whether they were willing or not, it could even be said that the demon Venerable was actually aware of their plans. However, as long as they did not immediately surrender to the northern region, the demon Venerable could not possibly deal with them now. This was because everyone would have the idea of surrendering to the enemy at a critical moment. It was just that some people did it, while others gave up on the idea in an instant and kept spurning it. Thinking of betraying and actually betraying were two completely different concepts. As for whether they would join the northern frontier, that would depend on how the northern frontier handled this matter. If the northern frontier could hold back their anger and continue with their previous strategy, the southern wilderness demon mountain range would gain some advantage in the short term. However, in the near future, the northern frontier would definitely defeat the southern wilderness. Under such circumstances, if the 11 demon pillars were to join the northern region, it would be equivalent to standing on the side of the victor. Even if they would have some negative labels on them, the chances of the northern region accepting them at this time was undoubtedly very high. What would happen in the future could be dealt with in the future, but whether or not they could survive now depended on this move. Shallow. It was simply too shallow. At this moment, Ji Qian could not help but despise his previous plan. No wonder Boss sighed. On the other side. In the prince's mansion of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan saw the anxious Zhao Guangchong. He grinned and said, "I already know your purpose. Li Zhong's idea is my idea. When you go back, prepare to build your army in the west. I will personally supervise the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Works to fulfill the conditions that Li Zhong promised you." "No, teacher." Zhao Guangchong looked more and more anxious. He said with threatening gestures, "The West is really in a mess now. There are constant killings every day. Outside the city, there are killings between the Northern Battlefront Army and the Southern Wilderness Demon Army. Inside the city, there are killings between the Gold Squandering Cave, the Gentle Village, and the Demon Emperor Association. Every day at dawn, we have to deal with at least 1,000 corpses. Moreover, the Southern Wilderness has been making a lot of moves recently. The killings between the two sides are getting more and more intense. If we don't have enough power to kill them directly, the Demon Emperor and the Imperial Brocade Guards will not be able to cover this up." Now that the northern frontier had dealt with the Hengduan mountain range and the Shuangjian dynasty, those who were hiding in the dark gradually stopped. If the news that the southern wilderness kept harassing the northern frontier was spread out, these people would definitely be active again. At that time, the northern frontier would be dragged into the quagmire again. The conditions that Li Zhong promised? That was not even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. Lin Yuan looked at Zhao Guangchong with a smile, as if he didn't realize the seriousness of this matter at all. After a while, Lin Yuan said, "We are clear about this matter. We know how to deal with it. Trust me. Just do as Li Zhong said. It won't be long before you get a group of strong reinforcements. Then, just guard the door of the northern frontier well." Strong reinforcements. Zhao Guangchong's breathing became a little faster. He couldn't understand Lin Yuan's meaning at all. After all, the situation of the northern frontier was right there. Li Zhong would definitely fulfill the conditions that he promised him. However, those things that Li Zhong didn't agree to, Li Zhong wouldn't do anything either. Then where would the strong reinforcements come from? However, as a member of the first batch of the Blackwater Army and the lieutenant who had the best development in the Blackwater Army, Zhao Guangchong naturally saluted Lin Yuan with a northern frontier military salute. His anxious expression eased a lot as he walked out of the door. Even so, Zhao Guangchong was still thinking. Where did the strong reinforcements come from? Qingjiang dynasty? Impossible. The Qingjiang dynasty could be said to be in a terrible fix. The Baixing Navy had to patrol the Wei River constantly to guard against the Sky Demon's attacks and the demonic beasts that were causing trouble along the Wei River. They also had to snipe the refugees who tried to escape into the Qingjiang dynasty. Who knew how many northern frontier agents and people possessed by the Sky Demon were among them? The other armies of the Qingjiang dynasty couldn't be counted on. The Yunmeng Navy, which was as famous as the Baixing Navy, had to guard against the southern wilderness and the Chuyan dynasty. They even had to keep an eye on the situation in the Hengduan mountain range and the Endless Sea. Compared to the Baixing Navy, the Yunmeng Navy, which was much more low-key, was the foundation of the Qingjiang dynasty. Once something happened to the Yunmeng Navy, the Qingjiang dynasty would be one step away from being destroyed. Other armies? The Qingjiang dynasty didn't have any other armies. The other armies of the Qingjiang dynasty were only slightly stronger than the militia. The Chuyan dynasty? That was even more impossible. Everyone knew that the Chuyan dynasty couldn't even fend for themselves now. Not to mention taking the initiative to attack other forces. The new emperor of the Chuyan dynasty would probably be laughing in his dreams if they could reclaim the territory that the southern wilderness had taken advantage of. The Chuyan dynasty was not far from being destroyed now. They were only slightly stronger than the Shuangjin dynasty. At least, although their lives weren't in their hands, they could still struggle a little. Whether the Shuangjin dynasty would be destroyed or not depended on whether the northern frontier was willing to lift a hand and let this reckless little brother off. Once the northern frontier wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. As for the matter of strong reinforcements, the more he thought about it, the more impossible it was. However, after Lin Yuan agreed, Zhao Guangchong actually had an inexplicable confidence. Chapter 1173. After Zhao Guangchong left. The smile on Lin Yuan's face gradually disappeared, and he regained his indifferent expression. He turned to look at Li Zhong, who was standing not far away, and said in a low voice, "How's the matter with Frost Mirror Khan?" Li Zhong bowed slightly, cupped his hands, and said, "The Reflection Frost Dynasty is like a grasshopper after autumn. They won't be able to jump around for long. Both of us are well aware of this. Recently, no Reflection Frost barbarians have tried to break through our defense line. I heard that they've already eaten all their food and warhorses. They've long run out of ammunition and provisions. Those who survive now are all cultivators with good cultivation. Otherwise, we would have to wonder what they're eating." Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he raised his voice slightly, and replied, "Tell me something I don't know." Li Zhong's expression turned awkward. He apologized in a low voice and said, "I've already sent a message to the other side. As long as the Frost Khagan is willing to end his own life, we will let the rest of the people go. I'm guessing that right now, the Frost Khagan is trying to convince the Frost Khagan to end his own life. According to the plan, we will throw these people into the Hengduan mountain range, and use them as a bargaining chip for the one you think highly of, to become the Beast Master. According to Yi Bujia's information, including the heads we have sent over, that one has about a 70% chance of winning. If he loses, it means that he and his tribe did not contribute at all in the plan to massacre the Frost Mirror grassland." As his voice fell, Li Zhong saw Lin Yuan squinting his eyes slightly, and his heart sank. After a while, Lin Yuan said with a dark look, "I don't want to tell you that the king cannot be humiliated, but this situation is not what I want to see. To put it simply, Li Zhong, you have made a very simple matter complicated." Lin Yuan paused, and when he saw Li Zhong's thoughtful expression, he continued, "I don't want to see the officials trying to persuade Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide. I only care about the result and the resources we have invested. Originally, you could have let those people kill Frost Mirror Khan, and then find an excuse to send them into the Hengduan mountain range. But now, if Frost Mirror Khan is really forced to commit suicide, do you think this king will let them go or not?" Hearing this, Li Zhong's forehead was already covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. There was a difference between letting them go and letting them go. If the cavalry of the Shuangjin dynasty were to be released back to the grassland, their fate would not change. But in Lin Yuan's plan, Silver Thunder's brain was supposed to be counted as part of the calculation, so it would be hard to say who would be the one to blame. As for whether to let them go back to the Frost Mirror grassland or put them into the Hengduan mountain range for internal digestion, that would depend on whether the Shuangjin barbarian forced Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide in exchange for their lives, or if Frost Mirror Khan was killed by them. Li Zhong took a deep breath, and a trace of worry flashed across his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Your subordinate is at fault. I thought everything was under control, so I made such a mistake. Please punish me, Dragon King." A mistake of this level was definitely not punishable by death. After all, the lives of those barbarians were in the hands of the northern region, and it was only a momentary lapse of judgment from the northern region. At most, it was just that the northern region did not have the right to do so, and it would cause some criticism. But the northern frontier was, after all, a force guarded by demonic beasts. Some criticism was nothing. But this kind of low-level mistake was not something he, Li Zhong, should have made. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes, and the atmosphere became solemn. After a while, he said faintly, "This king has sensed the opportunity to break through. For the next period of time, you will be in charge of all the affairs of the northern frontier. When this king returns from the Endless Sea, I hope everything will go smoothly." "Ah. Yes." Li Zhong lowered his head, not daring to look into Lin Yuan's eyes. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. The most important thing was that trust was a very fatal thing. When it existed, the people who trusted you were willing to bet everything that you wouldn't let them down. But when there was a crack in the trust, then all the trust would collapse in a very short time. For example, this time, previously, when Master Wu came to look for him, he did not dare to say that he had not been tempted. After all, the current Li Zhong could be said to be the king of the northern region. Even though he had always been very careful to play the role of the puppet king, in the countless sleepless nights he had tossed and turned, he had fantasized more than once how great it would be if all the power now belonged to him alone. Now, a great opportunity was in front of him. If he cooperated with those people to kill or expel Lin Yuan, then he, the nominal king of the northern frontier, would become the real king of the northern frontier. But in the end, he still made the most reasonable choice as usual, which was to take the initiative to report this matter to Lin Yuan. He did not hide anything at all and even speculated that those people were not from the Heavenly Gate Guardians. It seemed that he had gained Lin Yuan's trust. But did Lin Yuan really trust him? In the face of such a temptation, he did not believe that he could remain unmoved until the end. Moreover, if he was in Lin Yuan's position, he would have already started looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. But now, the incident with Frost Mirror Khan was like a signal. A signal that he was challenging Lin Yuan's authority. After all, this was not a small matter. Because if there was a mistake in the operation, then the plan against the Frost Mirror Grassland and the Hengduan Mountains would be half lost. Whether Li Zhong's behavior was intentional or not, it would obviously make Lin Yuan unhappy. At this time, Lin Yuan took a step back and handed over the entire northern frontier to him. However, he did not say when he would return. Therefore, Li Zhong could easily deduce that this was a trial for him by Lin Yuan. If he could make up for his mistakes and complete Lin Yuan's plan, or even better, he would be able to keep his life. Otherwise, Lin Yuan should be looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. It was about time for him to choose a place with good feng shui for himself. Yes. Li Zhong spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said in a loud and clear voice, "This subordinate will definitely look after the north." Lin Yuan replied softly. Li Zhong did not know if it was a psychological effect, but he seemed to see a hint of mockery in Lin Yuan's eyes. Chapter 1174. The next day, early in the morning. Lin Yuan had already set off from the northern frontier, following the Wei River all the way south, towards the Endless Sea. 3 months had passed. Even if the Outer Sea demonic beasts and the dragon clan of the Four Seas had a blood feud, they should have finished fighting by now. Even if they had not completely settled their grudges, both sides should not have the energy to continue fighting. Because this was not just a battle for revenge, but a battle that would determine the future overlord of the Endless Sea. Regardless of whether it was the Outer Sea demonic beasts or the dragon clan of the Four Seas, it was impossible for them to go all out, or even to the extent of perishing together with the other party. Then, since the war was over, it was time to reap the rewards. Especially in these 3 months, the construction of the City of Trade should have been completed. Even if there were still some details missing, it would not affect the business of the City of Trade. If he did not take advantage of this time to reap some profits, what was the point of building the City of Trade? Of course, even if the war in the Endless Sea had not ended, Lin Yuan was not worried that he would be dragged into the quagmire. After all, after building the City of Trade, Lin Yuan would be able to use the teleportation portal to receive customers from all over the world. He would also be able to connect the trade route between the Sky Martial Continent and the Endless Sea. As long as Lin Yuan was willing, he would be able to obtain the identity of the biggest logistics supplier in the Endless Sea anytime. At such a juncture, no one would dare to offend him. Because with an additional set of resources, the speed of recuperation would increase by a little, and the speed of recuperation would determine when the next war would start or who would lead it. After Lin Yuan left, Li Zhong then sat down on the stone chair in the king's mansion's courtyard with a bitter face, staring at the pond at the side, lost in thought. Facts had proven that if there were rules, there would be loopholes. Even though the Northern Frontier had organizations like the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the Demon Emperor Association, but at the end of the day, they could not be omnipotent. Luo Su was able to hide from the eyes and ears of the Demon Emperor Association and the Embroidered Uniform Guards to join forces with Lei Fan. If Li Zhong was willing, he could actually do something similar as well. However, it was meaningless to do such a thing because the northern region never belonged to him. The ruthless people who gathered in the northern region weren't here for him either. Most of them had no choice but to flee to the northern region because of their strength, talents, and other reasons. They had offended powerful people in their previous places and had no choice but to flee to the northern region in order to survive. In the current cultivation world of the Sky Martial world, just by casually asking around, one would know that there were many strong cultivators who had appeared in recent years. But the most outstanding one was still the Black Jiao from the northern frontier. In less than 3 years, the Black Jiao had quickly replaced Kong Xiang as the #1 man. This was something that even the Demon Venerable had not been able to do. After all, the Demon Vein of the southern wasteland was not far from Mount Shaoyi. If the Demon Venerable had not crossed paths with Kong Xiang, that would be strange. So, the ruthless people came to the northern frontier not only for a stage where they could display their strengths, but more importantly, they wanted to obtain the protection of the northern frontier. Obviously, Li Zhong had no way to protect these strong cultivators who had defected to the northern frontier. When the time came, even if these people did not come out to fight with him for the control of the northern frontier, they would still choose to leave the northern frontier. At that time, without the support of these people, and with the connection to the Hengduan mountain range broken, the northern frontier could really be said to be useless. It would not take long before it returned to the way it was in the hands of the Shenwu dynasty, becoming a desolate land. When his sister thought of this, Li Zhong could not help but sigh. His family's Dragon King was truly a person who could reach the heavens. The current northern frontier was a piece of land that was worth drooling over in everyone's eyes. But only in Lin Yuan's hands did the northern frontier become like this. Once the power of the northern frontier was lost, unless the other party was like Lin Yuan, possessing the identity of a demon beast, valiant strength, and a mysterious background, they would be able to maintain the characteristics of the northern frontier. It was just like how no matter what policies Lin Yuan introduced, the credit would be forcefully given to Li Zhong. Demon beasts were also extremely distrustful of humans. The main reason why the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was able to prosper was because the person in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was Lin Yuan. Otherwise, with the nature of businessmen pursuing profits, they would have already begun to follow the trend of the northern frontier, imitating the model of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and entering the Hengduan mountain range. But until now, Li Zhong had never heard of any Chamber of Commerce doing the same thing as the northern frontier. After a moment of silence, Li Zhong lightly waved his right hand. A wave of Gang Qi shot out from his palm, directly stirring up the pond beside him. "Your Highness, why did you call for me?" After another 2 breaths of time, a middle-aged man dressed in a long black robe climbed out of the pond. But the strange thing was that there was not a single trace of water on the man's body. Li Zhong's eyes narrowed slightly as he said slowly, "The Dragon King has already left the northern frontier. Before that, he also released Yi Balan and Li Xian. Now the northern frontier looks strong, but anyone with a discerning eye can see that once we start a war with the Deadwood dynasty, the northern frontier will quickly weaken into an empty shell. Those guys will definitely choose that time to stir up trouble. Currently, we do not know much about the enemy, but Lei Fan and Luo Su will definitely be part of the troublemakers. Go and keep a close eye on them. Once they do anything, immediately send a message back." "Yes." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Without waiting for the middle-aged man to leave, Li Zhong spoke again, "Also, get that spy to start working. He must find an excuse to cut off Frost Mirror Khan's head before he collapses mentally and commits suicide. Don't make things difficult for me. This time, the middle-aged man did not agree readily. After a moment of silence, he slowly raised his head and said, Your Highness, this is not what you promised us. If Frost Mirror Khan dies, the Frost Mirror grassland will be leaderless. When that time comes, the tribes will fight and kill each other. We will not have a chance to enter and harvest. Do you think this is appropriate? Fufu, Li Zhong let out a long breath and said with a gloomy face, The Frost Mirror grassland is a place that the Dragon King has his eyes on. Whether Frost Mirror Khan dies or not, there will be no accidents. Your previous plan is destined to fail. My personal advice to you is to sincerely cooperate with us. In the future, the benefits you will reap will be far greater than what you have now. The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. In the end, he shook his head and said, You can't even fulfill the benefits you promised us. How can you make us believe in the greater benefits you promised us? If this is all you want to say, then, forgive me for taking my leave. We will no longer be involved in the northern frontier. Ha! Li Zhong responded to the middle-aged man with a cold laugh. Chapter 1175. Lin Yuan stopped in the middle of the Wei River, his eyes gloomy. After a while, he grinned and sneered, A bunch of traitors, do you really think I don't know about your existence? If it wasn't for Jiao Jinchuan's request before he died, would have killed all of you long ago. The last chance is right here, so, do you cherish it? The middle-aged man's surname was Jiao, but he wasn't from the Jiao Wuying branch. The Xunwu dynasty, which had been established for tens of years, had two big branches, Lei Qiusheng and Lei Quming. Counting the inheritance of the Lei family, for example, Lei Fan, although he had the bloodline of the Lei family, he wasn't a real royal family. He was only slightly stronger than the average nobles, otherwise he wouldn't have been sent to the northern frontier to gain experience and gain merits. In the Wanjian dynasty, which had an even longer history, the Jiao family could be said to be a big family among the big families. Not only did the Jiao family have the bloodline of the Jiao family, but there were also many families that were bestowed with the family name of the emperor after making great contributions. After the fall of the Wanjian dynasty, although those meritorious officials still had connections with the Jiao family, they all changed back to the family name of their ancestors. The so-called Jiao family was just a general name. If they were to be divided, there were probably no less than 100 families with the surname Jiao. In this chaotic world, it was very normal to place bets separately. However, the remaining members of the Jiao clan did not only want to rely on someone who could become the ruler of the dynasty, they also wanted to rebuild the Wan Swords dynasty and restore their former glory. Jiao Wuying and Lei Fan cooperated to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. The middle-aged man cooperated with Li Zhong to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. These people had more or less harmed the interests of the northern frontier. According to Lin Yuan's logic, they should have been sentenced to death. But Jiao Jianxian had contributed to the northern frontier. Before he died, he set out his last wish. Even if Lin Yuan rejected it directly, he still gave these Jiao family members a chance to change. It was just as Li Zhong thought. Lin Yuan had never believed that anyone could replace his position on the northern frontier. If such an existence really appeared, he would only be able to obtain a desolate border. It was true that the northern frontier was his base, but only in his hands would the northern frontier be the northern frontier of today. Therefore, Lin Yuan never believed that anyone could take the northern frontier away from him. At the other side, the middle-aged man frowned slightly. He took half a step back and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, I don't quite understand what you mean. We all know that the Dragon King is powerful. Since the Frost Mirror grassland is already in the hands of the Dragon King, we won't fight for it. Why is your Highness trying to scare me with a sneer? Bluff you? You're not worthy. Li Zhong's face turned cold. He stared at the middle-aged man with a gloomy face and said coldly, I'm talking to you nicely. Do you want to fool me? Then I'll make it clear to you. At this juncture, I don't know how many people are watching the northern frontier. There are even people in the dark who have come to me for cooperation. But at this time, the Dragon King has sent Yi Belan and Li Xian away, and handed the northern frontier to me. Do you think that the Dragon King has no idea of your secret tricks at all, and he did this out of trust? When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment before he raised his hand and continued, if you insist on doing this, then I won't try to persuade you any further. However, when you're about to die, don't forget that I've already done all I can for all of you. Tut. The middle-aged man smacked his lips and suppressed the idea that had just appeared. Because Lin Yuan's series of actions clearly showed that he wanted them to express their attitude. Would they help the northern frontier complete the plan and then live peacefully in the northern frontier, or would they continue to do things their own way and wait for Lin Yuan to directly destroy them? Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan had already retracted his gaze and dived into the Wei River. What the middle-aged man's final choice was actually not important, because the moment he stopped, it meant that he had understood the consequences of his choice. At this time, it was up to him. Even if Lin Yuan appeared, he could not change his mind. He only needed to put this matter aside and wait for a result. If they made the wrong choice, Lin Yuan would not hesitate to activate the previous arrangement and directly send these people to hell. On the other hand, Lin Yuan did not mind giving them a chance to integrate into the northern frontier. However, entering the Endless Sea this time was much easier than the last time. Last time, the Wei River was filled with the Baixing Navy, but now the situation had changed. No matter how powerful the Baixing Navy was, they did not dare to continue blocking the Wei River. This was because since the rise of the northern frontier, the only overlord of the Wei River was no longer the Baixing Navy. Although the Northern Frontier Navy did not have an independent organization, in terms of elite, they were not inferior to the navy of the Azure River Empire. In addition, with the Sky Demon's occasional harassment, they did not dare to block the entire Wei River. If they became the barrier of the northern frontier for no reason, wouldn't they die in vain? Sneaking along the Wei River, Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. After all, the Wei River was never a peaceful place. In a small section of the water, there could be several clans of aquatic monsters fighting for control. After all, the Baixing Navy's military exploits were here. Zhao Xiang was also a famous general who could fight on the water, like Yan Xingqi and Lei Qiusheng. Him leading the Baixing Navy to patrol the Wei River was more of a deterrent to the Shenwu dynasty. Their real job was to patrol the Wei River, to ensure the balance of the aquatic monster's ecological chain, to protect the living environment of the people along the river, and to ensure that the monsters were not too rampant. However, the Wei River now was like a ghost town. Lin Yuan walked for nearly 100,000 kilometers, but the number of aquatic monsters he saw did not exceed 1,000. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan smiled and murmured, "It seems that the war in the Endless Sea is still going on. These monsters have all run to the outer sea and are trying to take root there. Although the Wei River is vast, it is still much smaller than the Endless Sea. Those monsters from the outer sea have been robbed. It seems that the dragon tribe of the Four Seas is not having a good time." The closer he got to the Frost Mirror grassland, the narrower the Wei River became. On the contrary, the downstream near the territory of the Qingjiang dynasty was the place where the aquatic monsters had to fight for survival. Even in this place, there were not many monsters, which could only mean that they had all entered the Endless Sea. With such a large number of aquatic monsters entering the Endless Sea, who knew how many territories of the monsters from the outer sea they had devoured? Moreover, they had not been defeated until now. It could only mean that the monsters from the outer sea did not care about them at all. They were now wholeheartedly fighting the dragon tribe of the Four Seas. Chapter 1176. At that moment, a strange feeling came from the unseen world. Lin Yuan suddenly raised his head and looked towards the west. Countless desolate world creatures were like Lin Yuan. They all turned to look in the direction of the strange movement. No one knew what had just happened, but one thing was for sure, something incredible had been born. On the Endless Sea, on a lone island that looked like a lone star, Hanba slowly raised his head. Hitorigami slowly raised his head. His grayish-white eyes trembled slightly. After a long time, he murmured with a hoarse voice, "This world can actually set up the grand formation of heavenly stars. Could it be that the legend is true?" Ji Meng. By Zhe. At that moment, the Tianwu world seemed to tremble. It was broad daylight, but endless starlight sprinkled down from the sky, as if it was going to cover the sky and earth. 365 stars lit up, releasing incomparably resplendent rays of light. In addition, there were over 10,000 slightly dimmed stars revolving around these 365 stars as if they were resonating with each other. Shortly after, streams of star energy descended, instantly enveloping the martial heaven continent and the endless sea. The stars in the sky also began to move along a mysterious trajectory. Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of fear as he softly muttered. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation was created by Bai Zhe, one of the 10 great demon commanders, during the ancient demon court. Once it was set up, it could cover the sky and earth, instantly separating them into two worlds. Even the flow of time would change. As the saying went, a day in the sky is a year on earth. This was to describe the profoundness of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. And this was only the most basic use of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. The most terrifying part of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation was its defense. Once it was set up, except for the original Gate of Life, there were no flaws. That was why after the Heavenly Court set up the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation, there were 4 gates of heaven in the north, south, east, and west. Even Taisheng and Yuanshi had to go through one of the 4 gates of heaven to enter the Heavenly Court. Such a powerful formation was naturally not something that could be casually set up. First, it required special materials to refine 365 greater Heavenly Cycle Star banners and 14,800 lesser Heavenly Cycle Star banners. Then, it would be arranged with them as the foundation. Among them, each great Heavenly Cycle Star banner had to be a middle-grade spiritual treasure, and the minor Heavenly Cycle Star banner had to be a low-grade spiritual treasure. If they were placed in the system's ranking of treasures, even a minor Heavenly Cycle Star banner would have a rating of B-. The killing blood sword in Ichi Immortal Yu Yuan's hand was almost at this level. It was stronger than a great Heavenly Cycle Star banner alone, but it was still limited. After all, spiritual treasures and magic treasures were not the same thing. Spiritual treasures were existences that surpassed magic treasures by a level. Above that, they would reach the level of ultimate treasures. Although spiritual treasures were also divided into innate and acquired treasures, the materials used to set up the formation were not differentiated. Even an ordinary ultimate treasure would not be able to withstand the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation did not exist in the Tianwu world. After all, this formation was created by Bai Zhe. According to legends, Bai Zhe was a great demon that knew astronomy and geography. Even among the mythical creatures, Bai Zhe's knowledge was at the top level. Such a talent was obviously not something that could be nurtured in a small world. Then, this Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation was undoubtedly the work of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Star banners required by the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation were irreplaceable. The quality and quantity had to meet the standards. For example, if a person's strength exceeded his physical fitness, then every time he punched, it would bring a great burden to his body. He might even die from the backlash. This was the same principle in the art of formations. The more powerful a formation was, the more materials and rituals it required. This was because every time a formation was activated, it would cause damage to the formation itself. To repair it was almost equivalent to setting up a new formation. When choosing materials, the longer the better. After all, no matter how rich one was, one could not waste money like this. Even the richest people in the world did not have the habit of throwing their money into the sea, right? It was hard to say whether the Tianwu world had the materials to make star banners. But even if there were materials, it was impossible for the other party to make so many star banners in such a short time. Even when Haotian, who was favored by Hongjun, established the Heavenly Court, he had used a lot of stock from the ancient demon court when he rebuilt the great heavenly cycle stars formation. This was because the materials and time required to make enough star banners were unimaginable. If he had to start from scratch, it would be too late by the time he finished. Heaven Emperor. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly flashed. He had to admit that Hong Jun was indeed steady, accurate, and ruthless. Now that the Tianwu world was about to be repaired, it could be said that the three paths of heaven, earth, and man were indispensable. The position of the human king had not been decided yet, and the god of the underworld was already in Lin Yuan's pocket. Hong Juan's subordinate had actually been able to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor. This made Lin Yuan somewhat interested in this Heaven Emperor whom he had yet to meet. Lin Yuan was very clear that they were both outsiders. At least he had a physical body from the Tianwu world. Therefore, it was even more difficult for the other party to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor than it was for him. However, the other party had been hiding for so long, and had been secretly plotting all this time. It was obvious that he had already obtained the position of Heaven Emperor. Therefore, this Heaven Emperor was undoubtedly a powerful figure. But why did he set up the great heavenly cycle stars formation? Lin Yuan focused his mind and pondered. However, he realized that the other party's actions were like the puzzling behavior of humans. It was hard to understand. The great heavenly cycle stars formation was second to none in terms of its defensive ability. Once the formation was set up, there was no other way in other than the four heavenly gates. No external power could break through the great heavenly cycle stars formation. During the Great Shaman War, how did the shaman tribe break through the great heavenly cycle stars formation? To put it simply, it was the 12 grand shamans who used a formation to break through the formation. To put it in more detail, it was the 12 grand shamans who used the 12 divine fiends formation to condense Pan Gu's true body to break through the great heavenly cycle stars formation. Pan Gu's true body was a power that could split the heavens and earth, or even destroy the heavens and earth. To the eldritch wastelands of the great thousand worlds, the great god Pan Gu, who could break through 10,000 techniques with his power, was not an invincible existence. His power was enough to create chaos in the eldritch wastelands, but it was not enough to destroy the eldritch wastelands. However, if it was the Tianwu world, not to mention the power of the great god Pan Gu, even if a sage were to descend, he would be able to cause the eldritch wastelands to explode. Then the question was the great heavenly cycle stars formation unbreakable? Chapter 1177. In the Tianwu world, the great heavenly cycle star formation was truly an unbreakable existence. Even if they could explode with enough power to destroy the great heavenly cycle star formation, the result would be the destruction of the Tianwu world. That would be equivalent to dragging everyone down with them. Rather than calling it breaking the formation, it would be more accurate to call it self-destruction. Of course, if they did not directly break the great heavenly cycle star formation, there would naturally be other ways to break it. For example, if they directly walked into the formation through the four heavenly gates, then the defenses outside would naturally become mere decorations. However, the problem was that the four heavenly gates were not the weak points of the great heavenly cycle star formation. They were specially made for the deities of the heavenly court to go to work. Correspondingly, the security of the four heavenly gates was also extremely terrifying. Just like the one in the chaos world, other than the southern heavenly gate that was clearly made easy for the monkeys, the other three heavenly gates were placed there. It could be said that anyone who tried to barge in would die. Even if a sage tried to barge in, he would probably have a layer of his skin peeled off. When the two armies faced off against each other, before they had even clashed, the other side had already withdrawn into their turtle shells and hung up a no battle sign. What kind of freaking operation was this? Could it be that they wanted to outlast their opponents to death? Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became strange. That was because the great heavenly cycle star formation had another use, which was to change the flow of time. As the saying went, a day in the heavenly court is a year on earth. It was because of the existence of the great heavenly cycle star formation. A year for the deities of the heavenly court was a year for the living beings on earth. Calculating it this way, the deities of the heavenly court were able to send away 1 or 2 generations of mortals in 3 months. Even the most powerful heroes would be as weak as porcelain dolls in the face of time. Once the great heavenly cycle star formation was set up, it could be said to cover the sky and cover the earth. Even the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was unable to pass through the great heavenly cycle star formation. However, what did that matter? What kind of existences were the deities of the heavenly court? They were immortals whose physical bodies had been destroyed, but whose true spirits existed on the investiture of the gods. What they needed was the power of incense. No matter how much spiritual chi they absorbed, it was just a decoration for a pure cultivator of the divine path. Those great chi practitioners who were recorded as immortals did not rely on the power of incense, but they did not live in the heavenly court either. Instead, they went to work and were picked up by special immortal cars. They were treated much better than the workers who crowded buses and rushed to the subway. When they were not on duty, they would stay in the mortal world and cultivate. Moreover, every 3,000 years, the heavenly court would organize a peach banquet to increase the lifespan of these great chi practitioners with spiritual items. Of course, ordinary heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals could only live for 300 to 500 years even if they were recorded as immortals. Therefore, the peach banquet had nothing to do with these small fries. Could it be that the celestial emperor had set up the heavenly cycle star formation to exhaust them to death? But who could he outlast? The power of incense itself could be converted into any unit of energy, including but not limited to cultivation and lifespan. Those old immortals in the heavenly martial world were using the power of incense to extend their lifespan, which was why they were able to live until now. Of course, this was because they took advantage of the fact that the 3 realms were incomplete. If the netherworld was established, regardless of cultivation or realm, as long as one did not reach the golden immortal realm, the netherworld would have the right to take away one's soul and send it into the cycle of reincarnation. In other words, once Lin Yuan became the netherworld god, the first thing he would do was to kill these bastards who played with life and death, and set the cycle of reincarnation back on its normal path. 3 calamities and 9 disasters, 5 decays of heaven and man. Sorry. The heavenly martial world did not care about this. If the netherworld god said you should die, then you must die. The heavenly cycle star formation was definitely not set up to exhaust us to death. Then, the other party must need an absolutely safe space to carry out some kind of preparation. Lin Yuan's gaze became more and more serious as he muttered, "It is not just to guard against me. The Shangqing Heavenly Venerable and Red Cloud Daoist are also targets that the Celestial Emperor needs to guard against. Because both sides have different standpoints, he is standing on that person's side. His purpose in coming to this world is undoubtedly to kill all of us, and remove that person's calamity of death. And that person's calamity of death, currently, is me. Therefore, he is now preparing something that can completely kill me. But it still needs time. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he said again, "No, we can't exclude another possibility. The other party has already set up a trap for me, and deliberately set up the heavenly cycle star formation to lure me there. Moreover, this direction is the west of the northern frontier, which means we have to pass through the territories of the Qingjiang Empire, the Chuyan Empire, and the Demon Mountains of the southern wilderness. According to my character, I will not leave my escape route in the hands of others. Therefore, I must destroy these 3 forces. This has changed my strategic plan. I want to destroy the northern frontier with me. In the heavenly martial continent, among the 7 empires, the one that ranked second was called Shiqi. At this moment, in the imperial palace of Shiqi, a young man in a white robe embroidered with dragons and purple brocade was sitting on the dragon throne. He looked down at the empty throne room, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, outlining an evil smile on his handsome white face. He seemed to have seen Lin Yuan, who was hesitating countless miles away. The smile on the young man's face grew wider and wider. After a while, a gentle voice sounded in the hall, "Then, the right to choose is in your hands again. Do you want to come to Shiqi and fight, or pretend that nothing has happened and bet that I am just bluffing you?" Behind the dragon throne, a figure in a black robe stood. It was Bygone, who had been humiliated by Hanba. Bygone bowed slightly and said with a smile, "His Royal Highness King of Wu has a great foresight." As soon as he placed his piece, he was already in an invincible position. No matter whether the black dragon comes to Shichi or not, the final result will not change. It's just a matter of dying sooner or later. Humph. King Wu snorted, as if he was not interested in Bygone's compliment. He just glanced at Bygone with a cold face and said in a cold voice, "Don't make a mistake this time. If my elder brother and your inferior plan appears again, I will personally take action and erase your name from the deification list. Even your last trace of true spirit will be obliterated." As soon as he finished speaking, Bygone's movements became slightly stiff, and his face became a little unnatural. Because he knew that what King Wu said was not empty talk. If King Wu was angry, he really had the ability to erase his name from the deification list. If it was in the early days of the Heavenly Court, King Wu would not have such ability, because at that time, the Heavenly Court was in need of people. In addition, the disciples of the three religions all regarded the deification list as a tribulation, and no one was willing to join the Heavenly Court. Therefore, there was the deification tribulation of the three religions, and the dead became the deification list. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.